Okay, I'd like to welcome you all to additional week in our 15-week lecture series on the Jewish people. It is a pleasure to have you come out tonight. I'd like to also thank the tape people for being here. We can move this videotape around the country. And just for all of you people in the audience, I wish you were here, but you aren't. But tell your friends you should get the tapes, and we've got a lot more tapes available. And you'll probably hear the number where you can get some more on this videotape. And it's for those who hear us on audio tape, which also goes around the world. It's a privilege to get another day to get to talk with you for whenever months or days or weeks from now that you eventually hear the comments that we're going to express this evening. Are you all having trouble seeing there? Do you want to move to the side or anything that'll be easier for you? In fact, might be even easier on the sides. Just going to say that it's going to take me about 5 minutes to get together here. And Brother Gant, I was talking with Brother Brown, both are very enlightened brothers, in a conversation that we thought for history's sake ought to be included into the official record, as Brother Gant asked and tried to get answers to several questions. Okay, once again, I'd like to welcome everybody out tonight to the lecture series entitled Diamonds, Jewish People, South Africa, including Harry Oppenheimer. And I think we'll have a very interesting discussion, a good 90-minute, strong, solid shot at this question about diamonds and Jews, because too often there's some confusion in our community about South Africa and Israel's relationship, which we looked at when we looked into the Israeli connection, which examined the interwoven relationship between Israel and South Africa that was far more complicated than just arms, where they provided jets, missile boats, missiles, and nuclear assistance. But far more intimate than that was the relationship between the sister city relationships between the major cities in Israel and the major cities in South Africa. For example, Tel Aviv and Johannesburg being sister cities. How can anybody have a sister city with Johannesburg? Also, the relationship between the universities in Israel, where every university in Israel has a corresponding relationship with a university in South Africa. We look very carefully at the kibbutz system, which is supposed to be socialism in Israel, where the kibbutzes, who are supposed to be the most liberal segment of the society, in fact sell their goods and have businesses in South Africa. So they too are interwoven in this relationship, as well as the that of entertainment, of culture. There's mutual exchange between the two. But far more important than any of those relationships is the relationship between Israel and those diamonds and gold in South Africa, and those founding discoverers of diamonds and golds in South Africa, for the wealth accumulated there supersedes all of the other things we could possibly imagine. In fact, becomes the core ability to finance those other things, like the scientists and technicians who would go away and get a nuclear weapon or would build an airplane, in fact, would get financed from money from diamonds and gold. Just a few announcements before we start up. Of course, we want to remember that next month is Anti-Colonialism Month. October will be in our second year of naming it Anti-Colonialism Month, but as well, we'll have our fourth annual Anti-Columbus Anti-Colonialism Day. And I can tell you this is not only going to be a fascinating month of October, but it is a part of a movement to break the mental shackles of racism, oppression, and white supremacy. For at the core of all of our problems is white supremacy. And it causes such things as unemployment, joblessness, they're both the same, bad health, poor education. White supremacy is at the core of that. I really am just thrilled at looking at the frivolous nature of the leadership in Chicago, both white and black, who are asking for the schools to be reformed. You can't square away the school system, because unless you overthrow white supremacy, you can't remove the shackle that makes them keep coming up with these impotent attempts to reform something that is designed to make you inferior. So they can't reform it because it is fulfilling its obligations, and white people will give you the illusion that they're standing with you, trying to help you reform, which in fact is a tool of their oppression. Two is, I saw today the anti-abortion people chasing Dukakis. I'd like to say that contrary to whatever my feelings are about saying that I would probably vote for Dukakis, I definitely wouldn't vote for Bush or Quayle. is that these anti-abortionists are actually doing something that ashamedly isn't done by more people. Do you know for a fact, and I want to say this for the record and on the tape, that if I had a field of newly laid grass or newly laid seed or a newly laid flower bed and put it in the middle of a walkway, I would not doubt that 99% of the people would walk around a newly grown blade of grass or a flower bed. But if you put the idea of a newborn baby in a stomach, they'll kill it in a minute. So there's a disrespect for life that deals primarily with humans. And that disrespect for human life is directly related to us disproportionately because we're the ones that seek those avenues, because we're socialized to say that additional children by us will cause some social problem, when in fact all it will do will increase our numbers against white supremacy. For God will make a way for every child. And of course the child like Snooty there is part of the reason why we fighting like we are. Ain't that right, big brother? So surely a child like that deserves to live. And even though it makes for unpleasant politics, sometime at some place in the future it would seem profound that aggressive members of our community would also stand up and be anti-abortionists. 3 is, I heard there was a discussion on WVON this week, and maybe somebody heard it, it was last week, I didn't hear it, about the most influential people in our community. And did anybody hear that on WVON, some discussion about who were the most influential people in our community?
Well, I heard it today. I didn't hear it over the weekend. They said they had it over the weekend. But they were, people were calling up, about who were the most influential. And one guy called up and told Lou Palmer that they said he was the most influential. I believe number 1. And I think that the Minister Farrakhan was close back and tied with somebody else. I don't know. That's what
Well, I had heard that this discussion had went on, and I thought it was interesting that WVON asked. I noticed that today Lou Palmer was making a point in talking about leadership and what was going on in our community, that there was such a void that he in fact prayed for young leadership to come forward in absence of our older leadership, because he didn't perceive that within that older leadership could come the emphasis to overthrow those impediments. And then he was asked systematically, well, will you name those people? And wisely Lou said, no, I will not name them on this station, that we shall just let them do their value and their work. And I'm sure they will saturate the scene in their leadership way. And I did that to show the wisdom of Lou by not being ventilated even by his own radio station, to give names where in fact probably whites are listening. And in fact, I had even heard that my name was mentioned in this influential 5 situation, and there was arguments over one way or another amongst a lot of people with the fact that the use of those names give focuses for whites. And I think we have to be careful, especially on WVON, about how we talk, because whites are listening, and it is no longer a communicative mechanism within the black community that it once served when they weren't listening. They're listening now, therefore its effectiveness has been limited because the intervention of the whites are actually sneaking in on our thought process. And I pray that we find another mechanism to think without their intervention. Next week, we'll be talking about the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. We'll be looking at protocols 1 through 12. And I think it's interesting that related to tonight's talk, that the first protocol deals with the Jews' concern for making gold the most important commodity in the world. And of course, gold is what we're going to talk about when we talk about diamonds in South Africa, because gold and diamonds were interwoven in terms of the mine fields and the mine owners, but also the fact that gold has taken a primary position, and in many cases, currency is backed by gold in many countries. And that movement to make gold the ultimate currency probably has something to do with the Jews and the protocols. And other protocols, like the 11th protocol, which talks about when all else fails, we will whip them by inoculation of diseases, which is seemingly somewhat related to some of the things we're talking about. And the sixth protocol, which talks about there's no more fear than we have of people who own land. Therefore, we shall make sure that the Gentiles and the Goyim own no land. And then I have an article to match with that says there will be no black farmers in the year 2000 because they're getting pushed off the land. And on a city-by-city basis, I think we can readily agree that we're being pushed off the land, and that's very important. So we're going to look at the protocols. This is an important discussion because nowhere in our community do we talk about them. We all read them individually. We hear about them. People have talked about them. So we're going to review the protocols 1 through 12 called Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, Fact or Fiction. And I think that it's a very valuable research project, and you should take the time to read the protocols yourself and, in fact, bring corresponding things that you find relevant to them to the discussion, because I think we're going to open up a process where we can catalog those 24 areas of insight and see what kind of information, current, midterm, and historic, that we can insert in those areas to see if there's some consistency to what that program for world control discussed, which is what the protocols is about. It's about a program for world control. And of course, as it was related to my case, no one ever wants to say that there is such a program. No one ever wants to say that there's somebody behind power exercising it for the benefit of themselves against us and our will. I thought it was very fascinating that this week there was a meeting held by Senator Paul Simon at Chicago State University, which he put out this press release. He had just arrived from South Africa, and it says, Simon brings red ribbon drive to Chicago. Senator Simon is a damn fool. Senator Simon, who was supported by Israeli and Jewish interests, has become such a flunky for Jewish interests that I'm almost sure, having been exposed as an anti-Jesse Jackson obstacle, and all of the things that he did during that time, he also was one of the early people to come out and say we should hang Steve Coakley for those remarks made in the mayor's office, of which he said he didn't even know what was said. Obviously, someone told him to get his ass out there. And now he comes back from South Africa, and having witnessed the white supremacy symbolic of that relationship, he come back with some damn red ribbon program for you to wear a red ribbon to stand up in support of 6 people who are purported to be executed by Botha. And after seeing all of that, he come back with a red ribbon. So we know, Senator Simon, who you are. And he comes back, and the place was packed. It was at Chicago State University. It must have been 200-300 people in the room. And in this packed house, a sister stood up and asked a very important question, which is similar to the question that we're going to be talking about tonight. She said, Senator Simon, most of the wealth and the relationship between South Africa and the rest of the world is through gold and diamonds. What does your bill, his bill is Senate Bill 2378, which he and Kennedy are co-sponsoring with Trilateral Commissioner Cranston and and the Bill Bradley Rhodes Scholar, who are sponsoring this to amend the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act of '86 to strengthen the sanctions against South Africa. This, in fact, isn't going to strengthen the damn thing. It's only going to give you the impression that somehow those sanctions have some impact on what's going on in South Africa. The interesting thing is that the sister asked, well, what about those gold and diamonds? And he said, well, you know, actually there's no way we can control gold and diamonds. And he went off and told some story for about 10 minutes that was totally unrelated, and the crowd started hissing and hawing, and it was obvious that they were frustrated and they were disappointed that he was evading the question that the sister asked him, what about those gold and diamonds? To which in the end he said, well, actually, sister, ain't nothing we can do about it, because see, they're so small you could hide them in your pocket. So how can we regulate what you could hide in your pocket? I'm just saying that that's just one thing we don't have a way to control. And there again, he's a damn liar. Of course, if you can hide it in the pocket, then why don't the blacks in South Africa, the real Africans, have them in their pockets, in their earlobes, in their buttholes, because you can't stop them from hiding them in their pockets. And the South African government does it, the Afrikaners do it, the Jewish people there did it, and everybody else there stopped us from putting them in our pockets. How come we can't stop them from putting it in theirs. So he fosters this illusion that somehow gold and diamonds are untouchable. And the reason I bring that up is this article that came out about Stars push South African boycott, which is in the Sun-Times today, or yesterday, talking about Harry Belafonte and Glenda Jackson are going to lead the artists not to do their little dances in South Africa. Well, that's garbage. So is that little jive time marching at those South African embassies that this little Free South Africa movement and the Trans Africa and Bob Starks and all them, I named the names, Randall Robinson, that little garbage they doing at the door of the embassy, which works for teletype and computer equipment and through courier packages unopened by anybody, including the government, ain't nowhere putting no dent in apartheid. In fact, they're there as buffers to help you not get to the bottom of the apartheid problem. Gold and diamonds are at the bottom of the apartheid question. Gold and diamonds, chrome, magnolium, and those other minerals. That is the wealth in the South Africa. And all that little jive time turkey stuff they doing ain't nothing but misleading the public. So we say to you, Paul Simon, and all those other fakers, that we ain't going to be fooled by this no more. We're going to zero in on those diamonds and that gold. And we're going to look at Cecil Rhodes and Bernato and Alvin Bett and the Rothschilds and the Krugers and all those others who assembled there to build the great fortunes which went out and financed things which always worked adversely to us. So we haven't lost sight of what they're up to. In fact, whenever you go to them little demonstrations, you don't hear them mention Lazar Perez or Solomon Brothers or Anglo-American or De Beers. They don't even mention their names because they're off limits to this little pee-wee leadership we got running around out here. And in this bill of Simon's, just to show you what a fool he is and what a fool he thinks we are, in his bill, it says that the sanctions will be monitored by a committee that's headed by the Secretary of State. Now, anybody who knows anything, here it is here, that the coordinator of South African sanctions is a position that they will develop, and this position shall be responsible to the Secretary of State for matters pertaining to the implementation of sanctions against South Africa in accordance with the provisions of this subsection. Well, that gobbledygook hides the fact that Secretary of State, as well as every Secretary of State, has always come out of the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations is the school for statesmen. You don't get into the Secretary of State or the State Department unless you've been groomed in foreign affairs coming through the Council. Well, then you got to know, well, how did the Council start? Well, the Council started as an extension of a secret society set up by Cecil Rhodes and Lord Rothschild in the late 1800s. So how could, given the Secretary of State the power over the sanctions, knowing every Secretary of State has come from the secret society to protect Anglo-Saxon Zionist rule throughout the world, which means it's a bill that's impotent. You're not going to make no progress on this bill, and every time those people come into our community with that nonsense, we got to stand up and strike out against it. How's Kennedy, one of the co-sponsors, going to be for this bill when, if you check the history, the Kennedys were very loyal and related to the Engelhart family, Charles Engelhart, who built the chemical dynasty of Engelhart Minerals and Chemicals Corporation, which merged in and was bought up by Anglo-American, all part of that combine. So how could the Kennedys, sleeping with the Engelharts, going to come up and have one of the Kennedys stand out against it? It's a fraud. And unless you have the information, you can't see through the frauds. And that's why we're here tonight to talk through these things so that we don't allow these things to slip past us. There was an article in today's Tribune, Depth Part of Process in South African Elections, showing how they're building this buffer on this illusion of self-rule for blacks in South Africa, sanctioned by the South African government, financed by the South African government, and it's saying that blacks, the brothers and the sisters in the revolution there, are putting tires around the people who run for these little puny offices, giving the impression to their people that somehow they're going to make some gains in South Africa, when in fact they're controlled by the South African government. One thing to deal with something that was said last week, as you remember, Frances Quelch Welsing was on WVON, and she mentioned that Jews were not white, which is false. In fact, she said that the dictionary told her that Jews were Semites of the Jewish religion. Well, doing the research for this lecture, I thought it was awfully strange, Brother Gant, that in the word Afrikaner also had the is as white as that Semite, that Jew is. That he's not that Semite, because Semites don't deal with them. They came to that area, they weren't born there. And so now we find that actually these words that deal with mulattoes, Afrikaners, and Semites may be some discussion amongst whites about purity amongst whites. Not saying that none of them are non-white, just saying that amongst whites there's a epitome of the pure, like King Charles and Prince Lady Diana and all of that stuff, the ones that they put the wedding on at 3 o'clock in the morning live on TV all over the world and say it ain't even for real. Well, that's South African stuff still going on. But now Afrikaner often meant mulatto or mixed race, and in fact they were called coloreds for a while. But in fact we know that there came on the scene another set of coloreds who were actually mixed with the Africans, and the word Afrikaner lost its mulatto meaning. Just like Semite should lose its mulatto meaning, because in fact we can deal with the Ashkenazis and the Sephardics and better define that misconception. And then of course, you know, in South Africa we're called Kaffers, which is nigger. And of course all over the world there's a word for the name nigger. Nigger is somebody who can't do for himself. And in the lecture that I give, Will There Be Any Niggers in the Year 2000, it deals with the fact that if you continuously can't do for yourself, then somebody's going to kill you off. It's a natural consequence of your relationship. But the Kaffers in South Africa, who was overseen by the great Jewish magnates, the miners, and the Rhodeses and the others, the Afrikaners, who were primarily Dutch and German, they, in their wisdom, made sure that the Kaffers were kept away from their land, which sounds like Chicago to me, that they limited and outlawed them owning the land, and they in fact made it illegal for them to get mines out there, the diamonds and gold, out their own mines. There was nothing they thought was worse than to have a black with a diamond or a piece of gold, because they weren't to have that. These were the things that they incurred in taking over the land. And then that brought me to another question, because in South Africa, what they were able to do was to restrict the people through military might. And then today I'm listening to WBEZ, and they had Spencer Leak on. Similar to a program they had on Eyewitness Forum last Sunday, where they had Stroger, or Sunday before last, they had Stroger, John Mahoney of the John Howard Association, and they had the head of the ACLU on. And they were talking about using the electronic shackle. And if you go back into any lecture I gave over the last 4 years about niggers in the year 2000, I warned about the use of that electronic shackle, where it started in Florida in 85, it came to Lake County in 86, and now Spencer Lee was on WBEZ and on TV. He's a good brother, I love him personally, advocating the fact that to ease the overcrowdedness at county jail, we're going to have to go to electronic monitoring devices, which will allow us to keep people locked in their home under house arrest without actual police guard. Now, what does this mean for us? And I suggested, as I stopped what I was doing on the corner of 87th and ran to the phone to call in, to which I did get in to say that I feared that electronic shackle, for it's not for the inmate, it's for us. It's for those of us who oppose the system, who one day will be put under house arrest for the same excuse that's used today for the criminal who can't make bond. What does that mean? Charge me with wanting to overthrow the government with $1 million bond on me. No, I can't pay the bond. Take me to the jail and say, which would you rather do? Sleep in the county or wear this electronic shackle and sit in your house? Of course, I would choose my house, because there is my information. I could get something done. But to be locked in my house with a shackle is no greater freedom, no less freedom than really being locked in the county. But in the alternative, one will choose the shackle, but the shackle is our destruction. And shackles will be mass produced in millions and sent to every urban city in this country, And as soon as there is perceived disruption, you better believe they're going to whip that shackle right on our legs. So I want to let you know that right now they're considering using this electronic shackle. And I would suggest that if you could get to the county jail, get the special elite, that you would stand up and oppose this shackle, for this shackle represents something that started in South Africa, but is headed here to America. And I know I'm going to be speaking out against it. And John Stroger at the county, who would have to help purchase them through the finance committee, because the county hospital is controlled by the Cook County Board, and the Cook County Board Finance Committee is the responsible procurer of all things. Then Stroger is a person that we needed to let know we don't want to see the imposition of electronic monitoring devices. And of course, it'll always be used against us. And it's always a Republican administration that brings forward the electronic shackle, whether it was in Florida in 85, Lake County in 86, or now Chicago in 88. We must stand up and oppose it, for it represents a great danger to all of us. One other thing I saw going on in Israel right now is that the head of Israel has asked for a law to make throwing a rock a lethal weapon, reprehensible by shooting. In other words, they said here that 2 Jews got hit in the head with a rock. Now they want the right to shoot Palestinian rock throwers because 2 people got hit in the head. When over 100 and something been killed, but they ain't outlawing Israelis shooting them down. So you're witnessing another spot on the earth where people are now being, in fact, in Palestine, they've been under house arrest, where they made the whole areas stay locked in their houses for days, where they can't even walk the streets at all. And I'm telling you all that these mechanisms that they're using in Palestine and that they're using in South Africa are actually practices for Chicago and Detroit and Cincinnati and Los Angeles and New York. Don't let you think that they ain't going to be willing to whip those things out on us, because the same people that are there are the same people that are here. And right now they're getting that leverage on us. And just look at what they make us do. They don't want us to think black. Look at this. Front page of the New York Times got the story of the plebiscite. Talking about, hey, in Chicago, blacks are talking about with blacks getting a black mayor excluding whites. How dare them cappers? And now they got Lou Palmer on the front page. And then there's a big article of Lou, one black mayoral candidate, telling other people around the country, hey, you all, y'all to beware of this. Blacks for a black mayor? That's unheard of. Did you hear Tim Evans and Gene Sawyer up there dancing about why they can't come to some black meeting? Could you imagine the audacity in 1988? Political leadership standing up and talking about being scared to come into a black meeting? This is a black meeting. Whites are not allowed in Steve Coakley's lectures. You won't see no Jewish people or whites in the audience here because they're not allowed. And they're not allowed because we need a place where we can meet for ourselves, about ourselves, for our own benefit. Right. For the forces that are against us are sinister forces. Judge us by our actions. If you don't see the blood on our fingertips, then get off my back. But if you were to see that same blood, then you can say or judge or accuse all you want. But look at us, a dying people standing up having to defend the right to be for ourselves in the midst of being killed off, in the midst of history showing that the only thing they ever did to us was kill us off. And now they got us apologizing for being for ourselves. And that's a sick thing, but it is the evidence of a dying people. More discussion on who's going to be the Negro leader in the mayor's office than on Providence Hospital getting closed down. We're a dying people. They just closed St. Anne's Hospital. What are we doing here? Why is it that we're under such subjugation, and then we got Jesse Jackson having to go and sit down and meet with that punk Cox in New York? Imagine having to sit with that cutthroat and smile knowing it ain't funny. We are sick people. Walk around our community and listen to every one of our leaders and see if you hear the names of white supremacists. Go get the tapes. I don't care who you pick. I don't care who you pick. Go get the tapes and see what kind of names you hear about white supremacists. The deepest you're going to get is Ronald Reagan. What's wrong with our leadership that the most they can name is Ronald Reagan? I don't care where you go. Go to any church, go to any mosque, go to any lecture forum in this city. of blacks in this country, and you don't hear names being mentioned of white supremacists. And because of the fact that it ain't no names, a guy like me stick out like a sore thumb. Because in our program, in our lectures, on these tapes are names. Because the only thing you're going to whip, what ills you is to know which ones is doing it. How am I going to tell you to fight white supremacy unless I tell you who the white supremacists are? Or provide you with the information where you can go check for yourselves. So we're really in a situation where we're sick of that dying mentality that spread through our community. And I know myself, I ain't going for it. So I'm glad you all are here, but we can go on and talk about it. And here are sometimes happily two racial events shunned. Talking about the march in Marquette Park, which was garbage anyway, giving a play to them little poor stupid honkies over there, the KKK and all of that. And then talking about the black plebiscite risk igniting latent prejudice. Ain't no latent prejudice in America. White supremacy is running amok. Look at that movie Betrayal down there where they hunting a brother down in a movie, and ain't one person out there marching against the movie. Ain't nobody even protesting the movie. The FBI didn't even break them up for killing the damn brother. They went on and said, well, let's catch him for killing the Jew. See, killing a brother wasn't even enough in the damn movie, got Deborah Winger in it. Or they probably going to try to give it an award or something, just to play up the fact that hunting you is fair game. And then when they let the brother go, the white dude kept telling his old lady, said, baby, I'm going to take you hunting. Right. She said, well, hunting, yeah? So after telling her this for a month or so, finally they go hunting. She get out there and see they ain't hunting no animals, they hunting a brother. They get a brother a gun with 10 bullets in it and tell him to go run and loose in the woods, and 20 white boys chasing with submachine guns and stuff. Well, the brother with 2 of his shots kills a damn dog, and you should have seen the white supremacists standing over the dog, talking about how we gonna kill that nigga when we catch him for shooting old Rover here. For Rover was more important to them than the brother who they were shooting down. Brother, this is sick, this here in America, what we going through, but somehow we got to get over it. We got all them damn money games running around here. I'm telling you the truth. Our people put up more money in them damn money games, but if you told them they was dying, they wouldn't put up shit. Imagine, all that money went through the T.L. Barrett's hands, then that other money game over there, and all them people, some of them people playing them money games are my friends. And if I was to tell you how many times they came to me and begged for my name, and how many times I told them God told me don't play no damn money game for no money like that, and now the whole thing done busted down, and a lot of our people are hurt. And a lot of our key leadership was involved in it, and it's a damn shame. And all that millions of dollars that floated up out of there, you couldn't get that same million to buy enough food to save your own life if you need. How many buses could we have bought and gave free transportation on Cottage Grove, King Drive, and Madison with the million passed through their hands? 20, 30, 40, 50? How many? Now Jesse Jackson ran for president and spent $15 million. How many 2 flats do we own now that it's over? None. We sick. We just play the same old shit every week. And it just ain't no damn good. And we just are dying people, and we got to snap out of it. So we're going to have a good time next month as we go on the offensive to whip down this white supremacy. That's why I couldn't imagine. And I just surely wait as we issue the call for any Jewish person that feels comfortable in standing up and discussing with us the facts surrounding that they ain't the damn chosen people of Satan Almighty. I said in the tape, The Fate of the Jews, that it is clear to me that the Jews were chosen. They were chosen by the devil to give birth to the Antichrist, and we can prove it. Now, if that is who they are, then why the hell do we stand up and take shit from them? Unless you one of them. Now, y'all agents of hell? Are y'all caretakers of the devil? Are y'all gatekeepers of satanic nature? I know I ain't. I ain't standing for it. So why are we going through this? And we stand up and let them batter us around week after week, and then they stand out unopposed, just unopposed. Even whites are scared of them, other whites. What's the problem here? And who do they think they fooling? And if they so bad, why don't they come down here on 37th Street? Because you know what? They know that the whole key to all of this, even making gold and diamonds at the core of that thing, is that what that represents somewhere in the hold of one of them damn mines has a relationship to them in the cave. To go in there is like a cave. And they know, more than they know anything else, that one day you're going to rise up. So whenever one of you stand up they check you out to see if you're ready to go the whole string. Because if you bow down or back out, they know you ain't the one.
Right.
See, they looking for the one too. The only time this time God done fooled them is more than one. It's a whole bunch of them. And they'll know them by what they do. And you just watch them back up as time gets a-calling. Because why are they overreacting, beating on the Palestinians like they are? Why are they doing what they're doing in South Africa, where it's more repressive than it's been in hundreds of years? Why? Because they fear that the time is getting near. They ain't afraid of no concrete. I'm going to tell you the truth. So we got to be careful. And we also got to know where we are as we move against them. You know, to want to go to South Africa and to get some damn diamonds and gold, to even go there where all black people are, sounds strange, you know. Blacks never were excited about going to Europe to live with the people in the caves because there was nothing there. For some reason, they all came where we were because there was something there that they were deprived of where they were. God put those minerals only on lands where people of color sit. He left the other land, the cave land, bare because he didn't build it. He didn't create it. Therefore, he didn't put nothing there for them to have. So the fact that they now have invaded into our lands, coming into the Americas, where were all people of color, even the Poles were people of color, Australia was people of color, New Zealand was people of color, coming in Africa where there's a number of people of color, to try to take back what they know was not for them. So now, even in the discussion, it's odd looking at these books and hearing the white folks stand up and talk about how there wasn't no black people in South Africa when they got there. You know, we went to South Africa, there wasn't even no niggas around. That's why we had such a good time there, because there wasn't none. I mean, we got there and it was just free of charge. There was no problems whatsoever. And of course, we know that that was not true. That we were there, all of it was ours, and who would have suspected that anybody would have come there to disturb what was ours? You know, in the late 1600s and early 1700s, the Dutch and the Germans started to go to South Africa, but initially they thought South Africa was no more than a way to use as a way station for the Cape in terms of the shipping and so forth. And that Dutch East Indian Company that came to South Africa was also heavily financed by Jewish interests from Europe, who were financiers of trade. So since you were talking about the Dutch East Indian Trade Company, you had to include Jewish interests because of the trade connection. In the early 1800s, the British got involved in South Africa, adding their might to that of the Dutch and the German who were there. But conflicts broke out amongst the British, the Dutch, and the German, and some of the Dutch went north into Africa. Imagine all of them hanging out at the bottom, and then with getting disturbed with your relationship with other whites, some of the whites came northward. They were called trekkers, T-R-E-K-E-R-S, trekkers. These were the Afrikaners who came up north, not to get away from the blacks, but to get away from the whites, who they didn't like the British. The British, they believed in slavery with dignity. They wanted the blacks to be slaves, but they wanted to give them measly rights as slaves, such that they could be colonized because they were savages, but you give them little measly rights to make sure they don't overthrow you. The Afrikaners were against it. They said, no, nothing for the blacks. Kill them off. We don't need them. The British and the Jewish people say, hey, we need somebody to work them damn mines. You know, it's pretty goddamn dark in there. You ain't going to be living too long sucking up all that dust. With all them problems we have with that dynamite, we can't control ourselves. We'll lose a lot of lives. We ain't got enough white people to waste. So there was a big scrabble over how to deal with this, but in the end, they all resolved the question the same. Hey, enslave them. If they don't act right, kill them. Get the minerals, and hey, let's go on and get the rest of the world. There was no question about that. The Afrikaners fled the British and became trekkers and went north of Cape Town. That's when they got up into Pretoria and Johannesburg, which are further up from the Cape. And that's how in there they began to settle. In 1841, the Jews who had been coming back and forth to South Africa, in fact, in this book called The Ranlords, South Africa's Robber Barons and the Mines That Forged a Nation, even though there was a nation already there, states that a small Jewish community existed in South Africa in the early 19th century. That's the early 1800s. Jews came to South Africa in the company's days. But not until 1841 was there a minyan, M-I-N-Y-A-N, which is a quorum for divine service in Cape Town. A few Jewish families established themselves in trade there, and at Port Elizabeth to the east, and even journeyed into the interior. The Mosenthal brothers, M-O-S-E-N-T-H-A-L, Mosenthal brothers, Joseph and Adolf, had come to South Africa in 1839. They brought a firm called Graaf Reinet, R-E-I-N-E-T, moving it subsequently to Cape Town and then to Port Elizabeth. They were big dealers in ostrich feathers, as well as wool and leather. Inland, the Linenfield brothers, L-I-L-I-E-N-F-E-L-D brothers, Martin and Leopold, established themselves as chief traders in Hopetown on the Orange. They traded among a rural community. The population of South Africa mostly lived in that country. Not merely rural, its economy was pastoral. Wine was made and corn was grown in the Cape, and sugar and cotton had begun to grow on plantations in Natal by the 1860s. To work these plantations, indigent laborers were brought from India, adding another ingredient to the heady racial mixture of the country. So that's how the Indians got to South Africa, was that they were brought there so that they didn't have to use the black South Africans. They were brought there to work the fields, to be the plantation workers on the corn, the sugar, the cotton, and the wine fields. And if you remember, Gandhi, you go back to the movie Gandhi, that Gandhi had to make a move in South Africa to stand up for the Indians. You know, against the South Africans in the movie, I remember there being some specific things where South Africans was just shooting them down and all kind of things. But that's how the Indians got there, as they were brought there to be slaves. And simultaneously, you know, the Civil War was going on in the United States, and the Civil War had just the opposite impact on South Africa as it had on the United States, whereas the things went in reverse. They lost control of the coppers in America, but they gained further control of the coppers in South Africa. And uniquely, of course, they went to South Africa. The Dutch went to South Africa only 32 years after the Pilgrims had come to America. So somewhere in Europe, somebody was financing, the Rothschilds were financing ships to go in different directions to colonize where people of color rest. So that should be important. In 1869, diamonds were found, and in 1871, diamonds were found near De Beers. Of course, De Beers is what is known as the conglomerate, the international monopoly that controls diamonds. Not only the mining of them, the trading of them, the selling of them, the producing of them, the marketing of them is all controlled by De Beers, which has always been Jewish. Now, Cecil Rhodes, who is on that board, of course, as we know in talking about Zionism last week, was the founder of a secret society in the late 1800s for Anglo-Saxon Zionist rule throughout the world, where all those major families got together to form the secret society, and it was aided and abetted by Lord Rothschild. Now, Rhodes in South Africa became the guy that went there, who, along with some other families that were all already there, some who were predominantly Jewish, were there, thought that it was in their interest to get control of these mines. Hey, look at all this. There could be diamonds and gold here. We ought to get control. But their goal was not just to be profitable. Their goal was to be monopolists, meaning to own it all. They never rested until they owned it all. And they own it all. They got it all. So, but it was a tenacity that around the desire to get it all was this mandatory relationship with a secret society, was purity. So it was money to enhance the purity. In other words, it was always you had an idea and you used money to help finance your idea. You never got money and then went away and thought up some stuff. Which meaning that white supremacy, this secret society, was a goal that needed money to help exercise it. We need Council on Foreign Relations everywhere. We need think tanks. We need insurance companies. We need investment banks. Well, the money had to come from someplace. So colonizing other people was a way to get the money. And since diamonds and golds, imagine. Okay, So you got a damn tape recorder. Now, if I became in control of a country, I could claim that little Sony tape recorders are worth $1 million. Everybody who got one got $1 million. Or I could order that everybody turn theirs in, and all those who don't have the mark of King Steve on it are worthless. Well, what does that mean? It means that who's ever in control can describe a value to something. A diamond don't have no goddamn value unless you give it one. Hey, everyone, a diamond is something special. A diamond is a woman's best friend. Diamonds are forever. Diamonds are symbols of wedding relationships. A diamond ain't nothing. You can produce a diamond yourself. It's a fusion of carbon. In fact, Edward J. Epstein wrote an excellent book called The Illusion of Diamonds, and about the Diamond Syndicate and De Beers. Everybody should have that book. Fortunately, I couldn't find none of my books on South Africa. I have them in a crate somewhere. I couldn't find the crate anywhere, but I had enough other material and footnotes from those books not to miss a beat in this discussion with you. But get that book, Edward J. Epstein, The Rise and Fall of the Diamond Cartel, The Illusion of Diamonds. And it shows that diamonds will be up any day the people say they're up. The people say, let's just say one day we said, hey, fuck the diamonds. Diamonds ain't nothing. We repudiate them. Anytime anybody get married in our community, they'll wear Sony cassette tapes or something. Anything. They can wear a flyer put on their hand. Anything we describe. It only has a value when you describe that value, and then the other people go along with the value that you express. So diamonds and gold are only, if the gold is $400, we can make it be $1 by standing up and repudiating, taking all of it and throwing it in the pile and say, we don't play gold no more. Gold thing will go zoom, because you have repudiated it, which means the gimmick is up. So remember, the line between the diamonds and the gold is that the people believe in it. When the people cut the belief, it doesn't mean anything. It's over. So we have to remember that, and that book by Edward J. Epstein is an excellent book at looking at that question of the diamonds. You know, Cecil Rhodes, who had that secret society, when he got to South Africa, he had to do a series of things to get himself in position to get control of everything. But his only real competition were amongst Jews who were also there at the same time, who had been working in diamonds earlier in Ostrup and other places where in the 16th and 17th century and other places they had been polishing diamonds and selling diamonds and so forth. So when the South African diamonds came, they presented Rhodes with his major opposition. This is from the book The Ranlords. By 1895, the most important financial group of the Rand, more so than Rhodes' own company, Consolidated Goldfields of South Africa, was traded under the modest name of H. Eckstein. I'm going to write this down so everybody can know this is, because this was, see, you hear more about Rhodes than you hear about some of these other people who were there with him. And this firm was called E.C.K.S.T.E.I.N. Eckstein. Eckstein. This became known later as the Corner House. You know, it was House of Rothschild, House of Morgan, House of Hamburg, the Hamburgs. Well, houses meant financial houses in the older days, where the Ecksteins, their firm in South Africa, which was more powerful than Cecil Rhodes's in 1895, was called H. Eckstein and Company, after its first Johannesburg principal, but was always known as Corner House. Ecke, E-C-K-E, means corner. And it became the cornerstone of the diamond market. They were the cornerstone. And you know, the first thing they do when they build something is lay the cornerstone. So it is at the apex of the relationship. So here we got the corner house. The corner house. And it states that the company was controlled from London, where the name of the firm was those of its animating senior partners, Werner and Vett and Company. There was a guy named Julius Werner, W-E-R-N-H-E-R, W-E-R-N-H-E-R, Werner and Bet. They were both Jewish. It's important to remember. Alfred Bet was in truth the genius of the partnership. In fact, the one great financial mind in the mining business. See, Alfred Bet had actually been trained in mine because being Jewish, the Jews in the 16th and 17th centuries, were into these little rubies and gems, which became known as jewelry. Right? That makes sense? That's why it got called jewelry. Jewelry. Because they were the ones who took these little stones around and sold them to people and gave them a value. So Bet could be trained as his fathers and forefathers were, and he studied diamonds in Aswap and other places, such that when he went to South Africa, he was one of the few people who actually understood what he was looking for. In South Africa, just like the great gold rush in San Francisco, there were a bunch of people chasing some stuff, many of which didn't even know what they was looking for. But they was hungry. So when you was hungry, if somebody told you go get some gold, you get rich. You seen the pictures of the gold rush in San Francisco, or some hooligans running around beating each other, stealing each other's mines, whipping each other's heads, killing the Indians, doing whatever they could do to get the little trinkets so they could sell and get the value from it. So Bet, when he went there, he was the mind behind Cecil Rhodes' ability to consolidate the diamond and gold mines. So it was a Jew who was at the cornerstone of that. Now the key thing about Bet was that when Cecil Rhodes saw that he didn't have the money to make it, he went to Bet, and it was Bet who took him to Rothschild. Okay? So Bet was the connection to Rothschild. In fact, it has been alleged secretly that all Bet was an agent of the Rothschild family. The house of Rothschild, which bought into the De Beers and Consolidated Gold Fields, and still today has their seats on the boards of De Beers because they're stakeholders. They were the financiers of the great mining magnates. Now, Bernie Bernardo, he too was a Jew, who was one of the early miners in South Africa. These are the millionaire miners now. These were the big daddies. These were the guys that eventually all consolidated themselves into one team. But they started off in different houses and then found with the enemy in greater numbers than them, the Kaffirs, that they then would get together for themselves to not only get the diamonds there and the gold there, but to become the leading gold and diamond people in the world. So Bernie Bernardo and his brother, they too were Jews, along with the Eckstein house, which was the corner house, and I know maybe on the video, I don't know if you can see these, but you take the spelling and make your own chart. Everybody should have charts in their house. You should have a chart. I got a chart going, it's just working its way around the room, because the more I learn, the more everything interweaves with each other. Nothing in history has happened in isolation of itself. It all has been a long, continuing excursion since the beginning of time to overthrow the direct descendants of God Almighty, which is you. Okay, so Bet and Werner were in the company of the corner house, which was the major house, even greater than Rhodes' house. But the cleverness of the Jew was that you always heard about Rhodes and his plans, but you never usually heard about them because they took the low profile. Just like the Hispanic Jews who were behind, who even maybe Columbus was a Hispanic Jew, since he wrote praise be to God in Hebrew on everything he did. But the Jews never fight the Italians over Columbus Day because they always want their influence to be hidden. Which next week, as we look into the protocols, we find that the hidden influence has always been the characteristic that they use to enhance their ability to control. How are you going to go out and fight what's hidden? You can't fight what's hidden unless somebody exposes it. So we put in the sheets on the ghosts so that you know just where they are. And we are going to expose that hidden interest. Alfred Bet, said the Ranlords, was in truth the genius of the partnership. In fact, the one great financial mind in the mining business. He had worked closely with Rhodes in the last phase at Kimberley and was now applying his remarkable gifts to the maximization of profits in the gold mines. As he had to rationalize the diamond trade, those who met the mousy, twitchy little Alfred socially might underestimate his ability, not those in the inner circle of mining, especially his friend Rhodes, who owed to him much. Remember, Rhodes had the secret plan. The partnership employed that Bett and Werner had employed several able men, a younger Eckstein brother, J.B. Taylor, Lionel Phillips, which later formed Phillips Brothers. Interesting enough, Phillips Brothers being eventually merged in with Philbro, became Philbro. When Phillips Brothers and Solomon Brothers merged, they became Philbro. Then it became Solomon Incorporated, and Solomon Incorporated, Philbro, Phillips Brothers, Engelhard, all now part of Anglo-American. But they all started there together. They were all spread around the world, and they all got brought back in. And even today, those engines are still getting stronger as Anglo-American, which is the inheritor, is see, at the end of all of these different names that arose during that time, several things exist today that are the heirs of it. The Anglo-American Corporation, the Anglo Anglo-American Corporation, and De Beers, both of which are in the same company, Anglo-American, chaired by the Oppenheimer family, who the Oppenheimers took over the whole consolidation. As this consolidated into one central mining unit, it was the Oppenheimers who then became the inheritors of all of it and still run it today. Such that Harry Oppenheimer was there on Nightline with Ted Koppel, and right now, if you look at Nightline, you'll see De Beers Diamond Mines commercials on Nightline, as well as they're on Johnny Carson's show, as well as they have a heavy layout in Newsweek, which is also Jewish, the Graham family, and the Meyer family. And Meyer was hooked into Lazar Perez, which too is owned by Anglo-American. And Eugene Meyer is the founder of the Newsweek Washington Post connection. So it all weaves back together. And that's important because Jews will stand up and make you feel guilty for raising the question. I watched this guy on with Henry Hardy on Warner show. And when Hardy said, well, you know, y'all in South Africa, the guy said, well, we ain't in South Africa no more. We don't sell arms no more, which was a deceptive thing. All you got to do is say, but what about them diamonds? See, nobody calls the diamonds because for the leadership to expose the diamond connection is off limits. So you have to be the one to bring it up because the leadership can't. Just like Paul Simon got to flittering and fluttering. You could have seen his eyes and his makeup start cracking. Oh, and at the end of that meeting, I went up and grabbed Simon's hand and said, how you doing, Paul? This is Steve. Steve Coakley. Used to see him trying to get his hand back. I said, welcome to my neighborhood. The people don't like you out here, Paul Simon. They know you're a fraud. The people, oh, you sure? But the people in the audience let him know that he was as phony as baloney. And the lady was standing right next to me and just got through telling him, you just wait till your next election, punk. You ain't winning nothing. I mean, and the people hated it. And they was on them. And there was a lot of Jews that came out to that meeting, too, who got to see that the black folks were there standing up, letting them know, hey, we ain't playing that stuff. And, of course, I was there. When I hit that door, oh, they didn't do nothing. In fact, I stood there and passed out my protocol flyer and stuff and watched them winch and wham and said, if you don't like it, come on down 37th Street. And you should have seen them. That's that Coakley.
Another question. You're saying that our black leadership has certain issues that they that they're allowed
off
to bring
limits.
out?
Off limits.
Always.
They're punks. Punks, yes. Off limits. How, for example, can Jesse Jackson talk about the Rockefeller family when in 1979 the Rockefellers gave him the Civil Rights Leader of the Year award? And if you know how much the Rockefellers do to control domestic affairs, how could you even accept an award from the person who, if you wanted some civil rights in America, would have to whip their ass? So you don't hear any discussion about the Rockefellers. You don't hear any discussion about the Trilateral. You never hear nothing about the Council on Foreign Relations. Them niggas just beg for a chance to go to the council and speak before them white people. You don't hear nothing about Zionism. You don't hear nothing about the Rothschilds. In fact, interesting enough, the guy wrote this book, and this is at the core. I'm glad you brought up this question. This guy, a white guy, wrote this book called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. His name was Gary Allen. He also wrote another book called The Rockefeller File. None dare call it a conspiracy, dealt with white people who were afraid to stand up and tell those who were running the world, God damn it, get your foot off my neck. But he was talking about it amongst whites. He wasn't even speaking up for black people, because he ain't got no more concern about black people than the whites who was whipping his butt. But the thing was, he said it clearly. It's interesting enough. He said one major reason for the historical blackout on the role of the international bankers, who are the ones that our community never talks about. I mean, listen carefully, everybody. I ain't leaving nobody out. I don't care what name you bring up. They ain't dealing with the question of who are these people. It says, one reason for the historical blackout of the role of the international bankers in political history is that the Rothschilds were Jewish. Anti-Semites have played into the hands of the conspiracy by trying to portray the entire conspiracy as Jewish. Traditionally, Anglo-Saxon J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller's international banking institutions have played a key role in the conspiracy. I have always said, and I always will say, and I don't care which tape of mine they get, contrary to the bullshit they run to the public about me saying an international conspiracy led by Jews, I always state Anglo-Saxon Zionists ruled throughout the world. That's what I always state, because I got the document from the guy who read the secret papers of these people, Carol Quigley, in the book Tragedy of Hope, where he lays out the circle of initiates. He lays out the association of helpers. He lays out who these people are, and it's indisputable. This is not even a fact of contention, other than the fact it's a contention amongst people who don't know no better. When I brought up about Adlai Stevenson when he was running for governor, about the Anglo-American and the Council on Foreign Relations, he said, you must be a communist or a socialist or a Labor Party. He just couldn't conceive that a black person would talk like this, because he know they ain't letting no nigger leaders teach like that. So why would any of us talk like that, since we have been taught not to talk like that? So Allen says that, but there's no denying the importance of the Rothschilds and their satellites. The Jewish members of the conspiracy have used an organization called, now this is written in 1971, and I'll tell you how close this exactly is to my situation. The Jewish members of the conspiracy have used an organization called the Anti-Defamation League as an instrument to try to convince everyone that any mention of the Rothschilds or their allies is an attack on all Jews. In this way, they have stifled almost all honest scholarship on international bankers and made the subject taboo even within universities. Which means that when they picked up the Steve Coakley tape at the Nation of Islam, they heard Anglo-Saxon Zionists rule throughout the world. And I stated it clearly now, and I stated to any other Anglo-Saxon I see, you're a damn fool. Because the Jew is going to use you to help colonize and subjugate and kill us off. And then when the Jew uses you, the Jewish person, uses you, the Anglo-Saxon Zionist rule, then he's going to pull something out of his pants and call it the chosen people and tell you to get down on your knees and make you the new Kaffir. So, when the only time they ran exactly what I said, it was in the Sun-Times, that Sunday, May 1st, look to the Sunday Sun-Times, May 1st, they run a transcript of some of what I said, and in it, the last paragraph states prophetically that the Jew will use the Anglo to exterminate the black. And then the Jew will pull out on the Anglo something called the chosen people and subjugate him as the new nigger. And you don't know how many white people, as I read that letter last week from the guy who told us to do that research project on the Rothschilds. Because once you drop it once and for all, there ain't no doubt, can't nobody get around it. Once we put it on this videotape and move that videotape, you can't get around that we got our eye on just who those people are. And if we got our eye on it, then what the fuck is wrong with all them other chumps with all that money in their pocket who don't say a damn thing?
Thank you.
What is wrong with them? Something must be wrong. Something must be wrong. So we got to get at that. So there is a stifling of the discussion Because you can't, how can you be flying around on airplanes and going into cities and getting medias and stuff to show up and play you out to be something unless you're doing something that don't disrupt the status quo? See, all that hullabaloo over chasing me was about the names. They don't want you to believe in the names. So they took two things, AIDS and Jewish doctors, an international conspiracy led by Jews, which is not led by Jews. It's led by Anglo-Saxon Zionists. The Jew will reign over it, true. But I surely don't want to let them kill me off to see if they do that. And I warn the Anglo-Saxon, don't let them let you kill us all just to see that they whip that Murphy out on you. Don't wait till then. And I ain't waiting till then. And none dare call it a conspiracy because they can't sustain themselves. I bought 500 copies of this book in the years 76, 77, 78, and just gave them away. I bought 500 copies of the sister book to this called The Rockefeller File, written by white people who were right-wingers who I don't even like. But they described the question talking about whites. In fact, the guy that wrote the book said, I know about this secret society. I know of the operations of this network because I have studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years in the early 1960s to examine its papers and secret records. He's talking about the secret society that runs the world. I have no aversion to it. Listen what, this is a white dude at Harvard. I have no aversion to it or to my life been close to it and many of its instruments. I have objected to it. I have objected both in the past and recently to a few of its policies. But in general, my chief difference of opinion is that it wishes to remain unknown. And I believe its role in history is significant enough to be known. And in the book, which is that thick, cost $30 in 1975, it reveals in depth, I mean, all of this stuff comes out of that. This is the most in-depth analysis of that secret society. And I mean, he got his finger on it so good that he is correct. The only way he could have gotten this information is that they gave him privy to the secret files. Now, where are the secret files? Do we need to hang this guy up on a hook one day and make us tell where they are? He ought to see. It talks about us all through the book. The book is called The History of Civilization. And it starts in Greece. So that's when the civilized world started, as they say. So you got to understand this was about white supremacy. And the guy states it, and you look the Cecil Rhodes thing in Encyclopedia Britannica, say straight up, white supremacy. They don't even hide it. And sisters talked about Encyclopedia Britannica, for they were one of the instruments of power that this guy, and of course at the core of that was a secret society, and the secret society was made like this. It was a inner circle, which was the circle of initiates, which was hidden and insulated by an outer circle called an association of helpers, such that you could never see you could never see the conspiracy because it was hidden in the outer circle. The outer circle was their newspapers, the New York Times, the New Republic, their media, the Channel 2s, the Channel 5s, their think tanks, the Rand Corporation, the Brookings Institute, the Aspen Institute, their insurance companies, Metropolitan, Mutual, Equitable, their banks, the investment bankers, the Kuhn Loeb Rhodes, the Shearson, Lehman Brothers, the Lazard Perez, the Solomon Brothers, their oil companies, their industrial firms. All of those were insulated so you didn't see these people. That's why, brother, that they don't talk about them because blacks usually want to be somewhere in that association of helpers. The Trilateral Commission is an instrument of the Association of Helpers. The Council on Foreign Relations is an instrument of the Association of Helpers. So nobody wants to go to this because then you would expose your role to be at that. Go to them schools and find out why teachers don't teach this. Because you don't get no tenure. They just kick you right out. You couldn't teach it at Northwestern with the Board of Trustees being on it. You couldn't teach it at University of Chicago with the Rockefellers and the Fields founding the school being in on it. You can't teach it because they're all in on it.
Well, I just thank you. I really do. Because you don't call yourself a Muslim, but you are cracking it open. And I must say to all of the audience, to bear witness to you, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad used to tell our people, don't take what I teach on face value, dig deep. He said, and all you scholars and scientists go and research everything you see me teach, and then bring it back to the masses. And I must say, of anyone that I know of, Steve Coakley is the only one who is actually doing that. And that's why they don't want you to hear the name of Elijah Muhammad. Because, same thing, you notice our leaders, that man, and I'm not just saying this, okay, because of who I am. You all have to acknowledge it's the truth. He did more for black people in this century than any black leader. All the black leaders put together. But it's a written thing. No black leader will mention his name. They'll mention every leader but him. And I'm wondering why blacks never question it. And this is why they are afraid. If you start digging into what he teaches, you're going to come up with all this. And I have something else to say that might blow your mind. This is what he kept. If anyone heard his teachings, he kept saying, the secret could not be told or else it would be giving away their power to rule. Haven't you heard that? This is exactly what he was talking about. If the truth was not to be given away. Remember he said they had an extension of time. From 1914, they got 70 years extension. Am I right or wrong?
Right.
14, 24, 34, 44, 54, 54, 74, 84. See, they had 70 years. And I'm telling you, you can think I'm crazy or anything else, but Elijah Muhammad knew all of this. This is what saddened his heart, because our people were so captivated by them. It's like our minds were actually enslaved to them. We couldn't even see what he was telling us in code, but he could not just tell you point blank because that was the agreement. It would be giving away the power to rule. And that's how they rule. They hide. And what do you think he meant when he said, they have you worshiping a spook up in the sky and you know not what, but in reality, they got you worshiping them. Didn't he tell you that? But you couldn't see it. So he said he was going to go away. And what he said was, when I return, all of my enemies are going to be dead. Okay? His funeral and everything else was staged. They were to think he was dead so that all of this could come out. Because he could have kept telling you, but as long as you couldn't see, he had to leave the scene and let them really think he was dead so they could start coming all out of the woodwork and getting bold with it. See, they kept a lot of this even more hidden when he was here because they were afraid he would expose them. But when he left the scene, they bringing it all out. They're letting it all hang out. And I'm telling you, if black people don't get together and unite, believe me, what they're going to put on you is really going to shock you. And you're going to be surprised who the executors are. You think some executors are going to be some foreigners. They're going to be some of these same people, KKKs and Nazis. That's who's going to be coming to kill up black folks and ask you, didn't Elijah teach you? Not that they want to be righteous, no. But they know they don't have a way against Elijah's followers because they know if they kill one of his followers, they all going. You see what I'm saying? Why do you think he told you, you make mockery of Muslims, but Muslims are a saving force in your midst? They know that if they kill one of his least, 10 of their best are going because they've seen it happen. So I'm not here trying to preach to you to accept Elijah Muhammad, but I'm here to tell you that this man, you all should back him. Because you're not going to find many blacks that's bold enough to stand up here and tell you this and not make you line his pockets with gold and put you in Elijah Muhammad's house like Farrakhan. Farrakhan will lead you right back into the hands of the devil. Steve Coakley don't call himself a Muslim, but Steve Coakley is doing more to liberate the minds of black men than any other leader is. That's all I got to say.
Well, let me just say this, because I always say that everybody should ultimately be judged by their actions. I don't necessarily want to make this a Steve Coakley, Louis Farrakhan situation because it isn't. We're all servants before God, not before other men. And anything that the minister does for whatever he believes is his program and his desires for the nation, and those things that he does that helps all of us, as well as Wallace D. Muhammad, as well as anybody else. We don't want to get in a situation where we start comparing men with each other. Everybody has a different act of service. Their different acts of services are needed at different times in life. I believe that I'm a creation of my time, and that what I add to what we have is the names. Now, those people go through other ways to get at the same situation, that be their way. Everybody has their own way. But I didn't want to take that tape and this tape, the cassette and the audio and visual, and send out the message that there is some sort of one versus the other. There is not, because we're all servants. And it'll only be Allah or God who makes judgment. And judgment be reserved for those who witness all actions, be the accumulation of all our lives, rather than just one moment in time. For can't but one person bat at one time, can't but one person handle a football at one time, but there's a lot of players on the field at the same time, and everybody has different roles. Brother Lauren?
Yes, I'd like to say one thing in reference to what the sister was saying. Everything that the sister was saying agrees with what Farrakhan teaches us. So I was saying, you said Minister Farrakhan is going to lead us back to the hands of the devil, and he teaches us, he teaches us as followers of Elijah Muhammad exactly is in accord with what you were saying.
What the difference is, so let me make it clear. I'm not talking about anything that Farrakhan is saying, but if you haven't mastered the teaching, if you only can go so far, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said all Farrakhan has is a wake-up message for the masses. The masses have been stirred, they are awake. They're going to have to stop looking at things in an illusory manner and just listening to the good things that he is saying. We've heard all that, fine. We've got to know how to deal with this situation, and we've got to know how to survive. So I'm not taking anything away from the good that Minister Farrakhan has done. I am talking about today, in this day and time. In this day and time, we must stand up. We must be educated. We must know how to vote. But not only must we know how to vote, we must know who these people are, as Steve Coakley is saying, not so that we will, quote unquote, overthrow the government, but no, so that we will take our places in the world.
Can
You see what I'm saying?
Something?
Sure.
This is very, very interesting and beautiful, but this is a Coakley meeting. Farrakhan's a great person, a wonderful person, but let's stick to this. We'll talk about Farrakhan tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, and with
I
that,
just want to ask one question.
okay.
You were saying that Elijah Muhammad is not dead.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. He's physically alive. And Farrakhan is his student. And he could only take it so far, and that's what the
Almost.
Honorable Elijah Muhammad
Go
said.
ahead, Lauren, and we'll close it there.
We also believe that the Elijah Muhammad is physically alive. So
Okay.
I can understand where the conflict comes from when you say he's going to lead black people back into the hands of the devil.
Because he has the master.
Well, see, you only, stop. You're only sending it right back to the same debate. And we're still not going to end up with no names of no white supremacists. And
Thank you.
that's part of the problem.
That's the problem.
Is
That's why.
that the debate must center upon who the enemy is.
Thank you.
And surely once we conquer the opposition, then we can come back and square each other away. But we can only square each other away after we conquer them, because we need each one of us, even the worst and the least of thee.
Right.
We need those to band together to fight the oppressor who's far greater than any one of us. For we ain't even positioned to oppress each other like they are oppressing us now. So with that, I'll go back to where I was, which dealt with, and we got to have the capacity to argue. I ain't got no problem with that.
But this is your meeting.
Yeah, right. And I just saying for the record, we have no problem with the capacity to disagree, and there will come a time when we can square those away absolutely. So that this discussion, brother, is hidden. The book also states that any individual or book exploring the subject is immediately attacked by hundreds of the ADL committees all over the country. The ADL, which is the Anti-Defamation League, has never let truth or logic interfere with its highly professional smear jobs. When no evidence is apparent, the ADL accuses people of being latent anti-Semites. The book also mentions that the Warburg family and Rothschilds helped finance Hitler. And the Jews suffered more from the power seekers, Rothschild and Warburg, than they did suffer from Hitler. The goal, of course, of all of them was to control the world. Hitler was through military. The Rothschilds and the Warburgs was to control the world through finance. So they agreed control the world. One was through finance, the other was through military. They differed in how they were going to do that. And the financiers felt that it was much easier to do it through finance, much more subliminal, because the people didn't understand finance. And one of the things to Rothschild, who was the key financer for Rhodes, who was the key financer of slave trade as well as through the cotton trade in the United States, was that Rothschild and all of his instruments always dealt heavily in government debt. Government bonds they always focused on. And if you look to America, who the number one buyer of government bonds is, you will see that it's Solomon Brothers, which is in fact owned by Anglo-American, which is in fact hooked in with the Rothschilds. So it bears out that they concentrate on government finance. And by concentrating on government finance, the book noted that that gave them the ability to control different wars, because who they allowed to get credit was who in fact could win a war by who they were willing to finance. And in 1888, Rhodes made his third will of the 7 wills he left, leaving everything to Lord Rothschild. States Allen, apparently for strategic reasons, Lord Rothschild was subsequently removed from the forefront of the scheme, which was the Anglo-Saxon Zionist rule throughout the world. Professor Quigley reveals that Lord Rosenberry replaced his father-in-law, Lord Rothschild, in Rhodes' secret society. Remembering that the secret society was started up in March of 1891 using Rhodes' money and was run for Lord Rothschild by Lord Alfred Milner. And if you remember last week when we reviewed Zionism, we established that the Rothschild family were the main financial supporters of Theodor Herzl, who is the father of political Zionism, who was the guy who put the political strategy in motion to make the state of Israel. And in the founding of the state of Israel, there was no greater financier than Lord Rothschild, who first donated money anonymously and subsequent to that got proud enough to come out and reveal himself as the major anonymous donor, which financed the early agricultural settlements, which helped establish Tel Aviv as a city, on into the financing and the development of the state of Israel. So we trace Rothschild in South Africa, in Israel, in United States, and around Hitler. Everywhere there was financing related to wars and colonization, the Rothschild family was there. And if you remember, Rothschild sent his sons around to the various cities. It says if you look back at every war in Europe during the 19th century, you will see that they always ended with the establishment of a balance of power. With every reshaping, there was a balance of power and a new grouping around the House of Rothschild in England, France, or Austria. They grouped nations so that if any king got out of a line, a war would break out, and the war would be decided by which way the financing went. Researching the debt positions of the warring nations would usually indicate who was to be punished by the Rothschilds. So that's something to be remembered, and that takes in the Rothschilds' relationship with helping Rhodes do what he did in South Africa. So Rhodes getting diamonds and golds could have never made it without the assistance of Rothschild, who has a history of assistance that is extremely oppressive and white supremacist. And the Rothschilds are still around today. They're making wine, and they had them on 60 Minutes, and boy, they play them up like they hoobity-doo. In fact, you can look and find Rothschilds on the European section of the Trilateral Commission. You can find them in the Bilderberger Group. You can find them on the boards of De Beers. So the offspring is still here, and they're still operating. All that lineage working in the same focus. Alfred Bett teamed with Rhodes against Bernardo, who was a Jew. And even though Bett was a Jew too, they didn't like Bernardo because they called him cocky. They felt that he was an exorbitant Jew. He bragged, he boasted. He usually started a lot of fist fights in the saloons in South Africa. He was a real clown. He was an actor prior to going there. He was a peddler. He just came there and became a millionaire because he got in on the exploitation. Barney Bernardo, who was, this is quoted from the Rand book, the Ranlords, quote, who was, if not the richest or the most powerful of the Ranlords, then the most colorful. Having been unable to beat Rhodes and Betts, he joined them in the great De Beers Consolidated Company, which wrapped up the diamond mines. So Bett and Rhodes teamed against Bernardo, and with Betts getting Rothschild to help Rhodes, they then bought out Bernardo, and he became a part of that conglomerate that went on and bought up the rest of that, which became the cornerstone of the diamond trade in South Africa. Now, all of them, Bernardo, Rhodes, and Bett, all of them were afraid of a guy named Kruger. Kruger, who in fact the Kruger Rand was named after, was an Afrikaner. he said, well, hey, all of this here belonged to Afrikaners. We was the ones come in first. Skip you British, skip you Jews. In fact, the Afrikaners, who were very close to Hitler, were also considered great anti-Semites. They didn't like Jews. They didn't like Kafirs either. In fact, they came out with the harshest treatment on the Kafirs. In fact, it was interesting, several reflections. When I stand up and say that those people who went to the mines were the gatekeepers of hell, I found it awfully ironic that I found several other people who also said the same damn thing. Even Kruger, who too was a white supremacist, he had stated very cleverly that he didn't believe that the whites should take the mines out of, take the diamonds and the gold out of South Africa. And he gave a thing about every time you take an ounce of dirt off of this land, the soul of the land suffers. You can't take the soul of the land. But later on, he got co-opted and he went right along with the whole game because he got some action. Okay, but Kruger said that those who are the diggers are in fact the devils. And I thought it was interesting that Kruger, who had noted that the only book he ever read in his life was the Bible, and he felt that he was one of the guys in the Bible. In fact, he felt that his folks was the chosen people. Therefore, when the Jew came, he knew it wasn't them. And when he saw the Kafirs, he said, well, it can't be y'all because y'all stupid, as he thought, because they didn't speak Afrikaans. Interesting enough, Winston Churchill, who was colonial secretary at the time that all of this was going on in South Africa, which was a position in the British Empire, colonial secretary, you oversaw all the colonized areas of the British, that it was Winston Churchill who said that in consideration of what went on in South Africa at that time in history, he said, it's my assumption that that is the fountain of all ill. And I thought that was interesting. Also, if you go into that movie, what was it, Damien, The Omen, 1, 2, and 3, it was interesting that in Omen 3, that the devil, Damien, who was a Rhodes Scholar. And if you go back and get that movie out of the video, or look at that flick, you'll find that Damien, who was the son of the devil, was a Rhodes Scholar. And I thought that was a fascinating connection, considering that the Rhodes Scholar, in fact, here's Churchill exposes Zionists. And I guess it was his discussion that somehow he felt uncomfortable about them. And I thought it was interesting that considering that remark that he made about the mine people who were primarily Zionist Jews were in fact the fountain of all ill. In fact, there's an interesting discussion in this book, The Ranlords. It says that in 1948, it mentioned last week when we talked about Zionism, the Jews mentioned that their key guy in South Africa, though he wasn't Jewish, was Jan, Y-A-N, Smuts, S-M-U-T-S. And Smuts, who was head of South Africa, was the guy who helped form the state of Israel for them. And that he meant a lot to them. And it says that he lost the election in 48. It says the general election in 1948 might have been a disaster for South African Jewry. The defeated Smuts, who was a Philo-Semite and a Zionist, without Smuts, the South African Jews were anxious. They still remember from a 1948 tremor of fear that the nationalists, who were the Afrikaners, came into office with their supposed Nazi sympathies. In fact, Voister, who I showed last week when I talked about the Israeli connection tape, we showed how that book opened up saying that the irony was that here was Voister, head of South Africa, coming to Israel and getting the treatment of a hero when in fact he had been a Nazi. And in fact was arrested for being a Hitler advocate and associate. But then when Israel had to make love to South Africa, when he came to South Africa, they treated him as a hero, when in fact Israeli law stated that he should have been arrested. So it says the defeated Smuts was a Philo-Semite and a Zionist. Without Smuts, the South African Jews were anxious. They still remember from 1948 a tremor of fear when the nationalists came into office with their supposed Nazi sympathies. The anxiety was misplaced. The new National Prime Minister, D.F. Malan, M-A-L-A-N, had already privately assured Jewish leaders that they need not fear his government. In fact, one of his first acts was to offer moral and financial support to Israel. See, 48 and 48, similar times. And one of his first acts was to offer moral and financial support to Israel, which came into being as the nationalists came to power. South Africa was one of the first countries to recognize Israel. South African Jews played a vital part in the first Arab-Israeli war, especially in the new Israeli Air Force. Dr. Malin visited Israel when he was prime minister, and South African Jewry contributed more per head to the new state than any other Jewish community. South African Jews contributed more per head than any other Jewish community in the world in terms of donating to make the state of Israel. So South African Jews were in the forefront of the donation, but they were only in the forefront because money was so plentiful. By taking over the diamond and gold and magnesium and chromium and other mines from the Africans, they had unlimited wealth. Okay? It says that South African Jewry contributed more per head to the new state than any other community. From the beginning, Zionism had taken root among the South African Jews. The founder of the right-wing revisionist Zionists, Valdemar Jabotinsky, J-A-B-O-T, Jabotinsky, T-I-N-S-K-Y, visited the country 3 times. And in any case, fairly or not, the 2 countries, Israel and South Africa, were lumped together by their foes. The 2 pariah states, which perforce had large common interests in trade and military equipment. It says that they both had common foes. Well, who were the common foes of the Israelis and the South Africans? People of color. In the early days of the Zionist movement, Herzl had appealed to a political supporter. The effort ahead of him was great, he said, but it was not too great for Cecil Rhodes. It is an effort which carries the colonial effort in it. What I want from you is not what you should contribute a few guineas to our fund, or that you should lend them to me, but that you should place the stamp of your authority on the Zionist scheme. In other words, don't just give your money to help us. Put your stamp on the scheme. If you go for the plan, we're going to get your money. The 2 never met. Rhodes sent Herzl somewhat obvious advice by way of Steed, who was in on the secret society. If he wants a tip from me, I have only one thing to say. That is, let him put money in his purse. And what he was saying was that if he had a colonial plan, then money was the only ingredient that was necessary. And of course, money has always been called the root of all evil. In this Rand book, it has a biography. And in the biography are some of the names of the people who were the early Ranlords. And I'm just going to read the names of those that I was able to establish who were Jewish for the record, so that it rests somewhere in your information. Sir George Albert, Albu, A-L-B-U, 1857 to 1935. He was very active in Jewish philanthropy. He was a diamond merchant in Kimberley from 76 to 89. Bernie Bernardo, who was the grandson of a rabbi who went to Kimberley in 1873, was a copy whopper. A copy whopper was a diamond dealer, what you call a cheap diamond dealer. And many of the Jews who came there were called copy whoppers. K-O-P-P-I-E, copy whoppers, W-A-L-L-O-P-E-R, copy whopper. And they were teased by the Afrikaners with that name, but they rose up and took control of the diamonds and gold and so forth. Now the interesting thing is that there's always been a relationship done through the Oppenheimers, through the Betts and the rest of them, that the Afrikaners were allowed to run the government while the miners provided the industry and the finance for the country. In other words, they split it up. The Afrikaners got their leverage by having the most people to get the most votes. They would outvote the Jews and the British, etc. But the deal was that neither one would mess with the other because they both had an ingredients to make the state work. So that relationship meant that the Kafirs was in trouble because nobody was for them. Just like now. So that is also very interesting. Also, here's about Alfred Beck from Hamburg, Germany. Went to Kimberley in 1873, a brilliant diamond expert, a partner in Jules Porges, P-O-R-G-E-S, who was also Jewish. With Werner in 1880, played vital but invisible role in the takeover battle. Life governor of De Beers, founded the firm of Werner, Bett and Company in London. H. Eckstein and Company in Johannesburg in 1889. Gasped the importance of deep-level mines. floated Rand mines in 1893. Compromised by Rand, resigned from board and chartered company. Shy and repressed, little Alfred, as Fritz Patrick said, was the outstanding South African financier. He left $2 million to charity, the rest of the fortune to his brother Otto, who worked for Corner House in Johannesburg as stockbroker in London and devoted his last years to the Bet Trust. Also, you had Louis Cohen, who was a Jewish father and had an Irish mother. You also had Herman Eckstein, who was who that company was named after and was a partner with Werner and Bet, and he left South Africa when the anti-German scare came. You got Sir David Harris, who was the cousin of Bonato in Kimberley. He too was a copywalker. He too was a director of De Beers, wed in first Jewish marriage on diamond fields. He was the trustee of the Kimberley Synagogue. Sir David Harris lived from 1852 to 1942. Then you had George Harris. You had Frederick Hirschhorn, who was worked for Werner and Bet, helped form Diamond Syndicate. Fell out with his cousin Ernest Oppenheimer when he was elected chairperson of De Beers. Gustav Imroff was related to the Hirschhorns and Oppenheimers. You had Joel Solomon Bonato, who was the brother of Bernie Bonato. And then you had, just for the record, name these names. You got to have names, because with these names you can trace the families. Sir Max Michaelis, M-I-C-H-A-E-L-I-S. You got Adolf Mosenthal, who was the director of Rand Mines, who was also that formed the family trading firm, founder of Cape Town Jewish Congregation. You got Sir Sigmund Newman, who was a leading mine financier. Now these are all the Jewish early diamond and gold financiers. Sir Ernest Oppenheimer, who of course was the father of Harry Oppenheimer, who took over De Beers in 1929, finally becoming chairman of the board of De Beers and the Center of Exploitation in South Africa, rose up to chief corporate group, eventually known as Anglo-American Corporation. You also have Julius Porges, who was a leading diamond dealer, P-O-R-G-E-S. And then you had Lord Rothschild, educated in Cambridge, joined the family firm of N.M. Rothschild and Sons, elevated to the House of Lords as the first professing Jew, closely associated with Rhodes and Bet in De Beers, amalgamation battle, and in the Rand mining ventures. The amalgamation battle was the battle to consolidate into one. Then you had Jan Smuts, who was not Jewish but was a Zionist. Now, how can you be a Zionist and not a Jew? That's an interesting question.
That was, remember I said, that's the whole point. It's the secret society.
Dig that.
That's the point.
Goes beyond it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Leo Weinthal, son of a German Jewish wool merchant, a photographer, came to Pretoria in 1887. Those are just some of the people that are mentioned in this book, The Ranlords, which you should have, which spells out some of those interests. Now, the main thing was that there was a Boer War in South Africa, where Rhodes had got together secretly with Bonato and with Bet and wanted to overthrow Kruger, who they felt was getting in the way of what they wanted, because Kruger was rousing up the natives. And they had this little war, and Rhodes and them got exposed as trying to set this war up. And they got banished out of South Africa, and they were humiliated. And that's when they eventually cut the deal with Kruger. In the early 1900s, blacks helped the British fight against the Afrikaners. And in fact, in 1906, I believe it was, the British beat the Afrikaners. Okay? And in fact, the blacks cheered the British as they walked down the streets on the pavements. But in fact, their dream of the blacks turned into the nightmare, and the British, who had been against many of the pass laws and the other things that were used against the blacks and the work laws. You see, Kimberley set a pattern for total segregation which few visitors challenged. The whites had their own village called Killingworth, which Rhodes had planned as his special hobby. The black workers lived in compounds specially devised to prevent diamond smuggling with the help of elaborate inspections. Lord Randolph Churchill, who visited the diamond fields in 1891, described how stark naked they then proceeded to the searching room where their mouths, their hair, their toes, their armpits, and every portion of their body are subject to an elaborate examination. White men would never submit to such a process, but the native sustains the indignity with cheerful ignominy, considering only the high wages which he earns. 10 years later, after the discovery of diamonds, it says that then came the discovery of the gold, far more important discovery of gold. But what that was saying was that the blacks were in such bad position that nobody really understood why the blacks would stand for it. Well, it was the Afrikaners who had come up with that situation of the blacks. It says that the mine owners needed far more black labor on the Rand than in Kimberley, particularly in the deep level mines. They naturally wanted to use the cheapest labor, cheapest workers available, and had no interest in protecting the jobs of the more expensive white miners. The white miners were Afrikaners. The mine owners didn't want to pay them all those wages. They wanted to move the mines out as you black. But the white miners was with the Afrikaners saying, hey, we need some leverage. We got to protect our jobs. So they passed laws that in fact made it illegal for blacks to handle the dynamite, to be the engineers. The blacks got legislated out of all the positions, and the mine owners couldn't do nothing about it. And that was part of the fight. When the white miners pressed for a color bar, the Chamber of Mines opposed it. That was the British. But they could not prevent the Transvaal passing the first statutory color bar in 1893. Thus, from the beginning, the mine owners were not necessarily in favor of discrimination, but they did impose rigid segregation through the compound system that they devised in Kimberley to accommodate migrant workers, which helped to conceal the native problem. John Hayes Hammond, Rhodes' American engineer, objected to the dependence on migrant workers. In order to ensure a permanent supply of efficient workers, I suggested to Rhodes we establish a native village near the mines where boys could live with their wives and families. But the other mine owners did not approve, and it was many years before they were to face the political consequences of the workforce they had created. So there was this fight. And see, Kruger said he was a tribal chieftain from the Old Testament leading a chosen people who were facing ungodly invaders. To Bernardo, throw him out there. Kruger said the mine owners were representatives of the devil. And I thought that was interesting, yet Kruger was quite content to exploit the mines later on. But the main thing there was that there was this fight over dealing with the blacks and how to deal on them and how to keep them locked up. It says it was essentially a white city. The diggers were determined to exclude blacks from digging, complaining that they stole the stones. Imagine stealing the stones from your own land. They burnt their tents, flogged them if they tried to dig, and imposed a system of passes to keep them out of the fields, and only protest from the colonial law. Only protest against from the colonial office in London came. Soon blacks were only allowed to work on the fields as laborers or servants, and the color bar was built into the diggers' society. So the actual color bar didn't come until the diggers came. So when you wonder what is the role of the diamond and the gold people to the level of South Africa, it was because of the diamond and the gold mines and the digging that the color bar actually became legalized. Because prior to that, the Dutch and them stayed to themselves and the Africans stayed to themselves. There was no integration. But to fulfill the obligations of the mines, remember earlier it was just corn, wine, and other farmery things, they did it themselves. That was their only jobs. But when the mines came and they needed labor, then there was forced integration. This forced integration, which prior to that had only been come through war, that there was war, that was the only integration that the foresters fought, was that now, for the sake of the miners, the color bar had to become legalized. And the Afrikaners fought to intensify the color bar because they wanted to protect the other whites whose only jobs were as the technicians in the mines, who then got the positions of overseeing the blacks in the mines. Okay? That make any sense? This is from the book called Black and Gold, written by Anthony Sampson, who wrote the book on the Seven Sisters, who wrote the Money Lenders. He wrote quite a few very good books. He wrote a book on the airlines industry, the Arms Bazaar, the Sovereign State, the Money Lenders, the Anatomy of Britain Today, the New Anatomy of Britain, and a lot of other books. The Empires in the Sky, that's his latest one about airlines and stuff, but this is the latest, Black and Gold. The Tycoons, the Revolutionaries, and Apartheid. These two books are the two most current books. The book written by Edward J. Epstein, who wrote a lot of good books, is about 85, about the illusion of diamonds. It's excellent. There's another book called The World of Diamonds. There's another book called The Jews and Diamonds, or something like that. But these books should be in the focal point of your library because of the information that they have, that they hold in regards to exposing those concerns. Now, the three most important Jews in South Africa we looked at last week in this article from a Jewish magazine called the Sentinel is Jews of South Africa the first 100 years. And in this article by Hannah Gale, it says that the three most important Jews in South Africa were the Rothschilds first, then the Ernest Oppenheimer second, and Harry Oppenheimer third. Well, that carries you all the way through to today. Because now Harry's sons are running it, but Harry's still a godfather. Like I say, he was the one that was on Nightline as the richest man in the world. It says the major Jewish influx came with the discovery of diamonds and gold in Boer territory around 1880. Some of the largest Jewish fortunes in the world were founded during this time, as well as the beginning of Jewish political power in South Africa. The stories of these men are not only interesting, but they are vital to understanding of South Africa's development in the economic world. It says Cecil Rhodes, who fancied a monopoly on the diamond mines of South Africa, knew how to achieve it. He brought out the two other major holders named Alfred Bett and Barney Bernardo. Rhodes approached Bett and Rothschild in London with his plan. Bett agreed immediately, and Rothschild financed a loan to Rhodes of £2 million. That helped Rhodes then consolidate the mines. The next important Jewish figure was Ernest Oppenheimer. He converted to Catholicism upon his second marriage. Founder of the Anglo-American Corporation, Oppenheimer mined gold in the Far East Rand and brought the consolidated diamond mines of Southwest Africa. The only company permitted to mine in Northwest Cape. He then became the director of De Beers in 1926. In 1929, Ernest Oppenheimer became the chairman. He formed the Diamond Corporation, which gave De Beers and other major producers the direct interest in the sale of stones. Okay? So that dealt with the question of those two being the key to, and it says that Smuts was the fourth most important guy, though he wasn't Jewish. He was a guy who became prime minister in 1918 and helped form the United Party, which was somewhat progressive, which was heavily financed by the Oppenheimers, and he was instrumental in securing the Balfour Declaration, which Lord Rothschild, the Balfour Agreement was written to Lord Rothschild, who had been the first Jew that was knighted or lorded in England, which committed Britain to the concept of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Smuts was still foreign minister then. Smuts believed that the Jews had been treated disgracefully throughout history and that their diaspora was a crime and it was Christians' duty to correct it. Smuts began a friendship with Clam Weiserman, the first president of Israel, at this time, which continued until his death. As the South African Jews were always ardent Zionists, the support of Jan Smuts was extremely valuable to them as well as to the Jews of the world. Friends of Israel were hard to come by then. So that talks about those three, and it says that the marriage of Israel, this is the third in the series of that article, South African Jews, the Israeli question. The marriage of Israel and South Africa extended to many areas. The two countries were already tied economically, as Tel Aviv is a diamond center and second only to Antwerp, Belgium. And Israel gets over 50% of its diamonds from South Africa. Okay? In 1978, South Africa agreed to a special dispensation waiving the stringent laws governing export of capital to allow Jewish business executives to export their products directly to the country, as well as they let the Jews send an exorbitant amount of money out of South Africa during the time that they wanted to form the state of Israel, unlike other countries who restricted some of the Jewish currency going out. So now, let's carry this up through the years. Oppenheimer takes over in 29. In the 1930s, Hitler, now this is interesting, Hitler continued to obtain diamonds throughout the war. Now it's interesting that during the war, the World War II, The Americans and the British needed diamonds because they helped make precision parts for airplanes, engines, torpedoes, and tanks. Interesting enough, De Beers would not give diamonds to the United States. And it caused a great conflict between the president and De Beers, who had a monopoly. In fact, they tried to move on De Beers to knock out their monopoly, and De Beers eased up and gave America some diamonds, but they were giving the diamonds to Hitler all along. Now, how could the mining Jews from South Africa give diamonds to Hitler? Well, the transfer agreement exposed, as none dare conspiracy says it, the Rothschilds and those rich Jews were the financiers of Hitler. And there were no Rothschilds and no Warburgs going to no furnaces. So there was a fight amongst Jews about which Jews was going to go down. But all Jews wasn't in on going down. Diamonds went into the guidance system for planes and submarines. While Hitler got all he needed, De Beers tried to sell America none. The overt loyalty was to economics. When Israel became a constituted state in the 1940s, diamonds were its only industry. When Israel was founded in the 1940s, diamonds were its only industry. The only other industry it had was agriculture, which was the extension of the agricultural little farms that had been set up by Rothschild himself. So Rothschild had the diamonds and the agriculture going in his favor. And that time, that agriculture, a lot was made up of wine. So this consolidation of the diamonds and gold started to become known throughout the world. In London, it was called the Diamond Trading Company. In Israel, it was called the Syndicate. In Belgium, it was called the Central Selling Organization. Of course, these names in Africa, it was disguised as the Diamond Development Corporation and the Mining Services Incorporation. Even the Soviet Union sold all of its diamonds to De Beers, which is interesting because, and we'll talk about that in a minute, the Jewish connection. The state of Israel was constituted in 1948. So involvement in South Africa can only be measured by monitoring Jewish involvement rather than Israeli involvement. Jews helped finance the Dutch East Indian Trading Company, the earliest traders in South Africa. Cecil Rhodes expressed a value system. If you didn't like his value system, you in 1948, so the involvement of South Africa can only be measured by monitoring Jewish involvement rather than Israeli involvement. The Jews helped finance the Dutch East Indian Trading Company, which were the earliest traders in South Africa, and importantly, they helped finance Cecil Rhodes, who had a value system. His value system was a secret society for white supremacy, so the Jews would not have assisted him if they did not agree with his values. Cecil Rhodes became dominant in the mines because the moneylenders helped him purchase the machinery like steam pumps and other mineral producers he needed to make his machinery work. Why are diamonds Jewish? This is from a book called The Diamond People. Page 49. For Jews in the diamond business, to break their word is not merely unethical, it is sacrilegious. The Talmud, for instance, which details in millions of words how a Jew should behave toward a man and God will descend upon him who breaks his word. It is written there that he that exacted punishment from the generation of the flood and the generation of the dispersion will exact punishment from him that does not abide by the spoken word. If the Jews gonna get punishment for breaking the Talmud, they ass in big trouble, because they done broke every religious law. And as I stated emphatically, that nowhere in the world are the Jewish people motivated by religious values. Everywhere you see them, they're motivated by the value of power and money. Never do they make spiritual considerations. In fact, Prince Aziel was on WBMX today, gave an excellent piece on the whole relationship of Israel and the original Jews and even the Hebrew Israelites. And if there's a tape, I'm going to try to get that tape and put that portion that he gave on the back of one of these tapes, because it was excellent in understanding that question. It was inevitable then that the Jews, with their expert knowledge of precious metals and gems, should move more successfully into the area of money lending to non-Jews whose main collateral was jewelry and other objects of easily negotiable metal and gems. The role of the rabbis in Jewish life was also important in maintaining an ethical business code that crossed national boundaries. It was not until the early in the 20th century that the diamond business began to boom in the United States. This was due to the coincidence of the growth of the vast fortunes and no income taxes in the United States and the discovery of diamond mines in South Africa. By the end of the first decade of the 1900s, Jewish diamond merchants, generally from Europe, had made New York City the diamond center of the United States. The European connection gave them the advantage. Now, you all are aware of New York. They have a thing called the what? The Diamond Dealers Club, which prefers to operate in secrecy. You know there's a section in New York where ain't nothing but Jews with them long beards and them hats. That's all Jewish, okay? Them diamonds coming from South Africa. So if anybody want to ever talk to you about the relationship, say, hey, how about going down there on, what's that street, 42nd Street? Or why not go to West 47th Street in New York and see the 15,000 people in a tight community where 80% of all the United States diamonds drop off there first.
Right. That's where they're polished.
Remember, it's where they're sold, polished, marketed, and controlled. And they got a big building there too. And I remember there was sometimes somebody was going in there shooting them up, how they banded together. And I mean, they was wiping New York out. Remember, New York got that diamond trading center there called the Club. And always remember, anytime anybody bring that up to you, you say, let's go to the club, goddammit. I know where you're at.
Hey, which one is the club?
Let's go to the club in New York. It ain't far. It don't take much to get there. We can drive there. Right?
Right. Let's go.
Said the Diamonds Dealers Club is the most powerful organization in the nation's diamond business. The club is a shadow government of some 15,000 diamond people who handle an estimated 80% of all diamonds that come into the United States. Okay? It says that you have to apply to be a member. Now, they showed in one of the books, say, hey, they sit up and say, hey, I look at you good, I don't like you. You got some Kaffir friends? Oh, no. They wipe you out. Now, if you can't get a membership there, the rejected applicants can apply to the Diamond Trade Association of America, which has about 700 members, mainly for dealers in stones other than diamonds, such as emeralds, rubies, and also for those who specialize in rough diamonds. An important source of power for the Diamond Dealers Club is its influence in settling disputes among its members. Understand what that means, that the Diamond Dealers Club has a aristocracy to it. And that aristocracy has an iron grip on all those who deal in those diamonds. Which means that when there's a dispute between two Jews over a diamond, like when you get handed your diamond, you got to go in secret and look at it. They don't let you look with other people. I mean, they keep you tied off to the side. And I'm going to explain how tight that is. But if they decide you ain't acting right, and they want to make a move, you got to abide by the laws. You can't get into the network. And to be into the network is a privilege. Now, since 95% of the world's diamonds are controlled by De Beers, all those diamonds they deal in didn't come from De Beers, which is South Africa, Anglo-American, and the Jewish Oppenheimer family, from the Betts and the Bernados and the Rhodeses and the Ecksteins and the Werners, all those from the corner house, all that's that legacy still humping right now today. Now, let me say this about the diamonds. And I got it right here. Oh, here again. You want that back? I'd like to see that one day. A copy of it. Says De Beers has an explosives factory which is the largest in all of Africa. There are more workers in a single gold mine than all De Beers diamond mines in South Africa. The diamond business is totally controlled by the Oppenheimer house. Their examiners get the uncut diamonds. They then have the diamond cutters, and the diamond polishers are in Israel. They formed several organizations to control all of the things that they had at their access. The Diamond Traders Company in London holds the world's supply of uncut diamonds. The Diamonds Producers Association represents the individual producers as well as De Beers. The New York Diamond Connection, which is the club. Now, De Beers has a guy who's famous named Monty Charles. Monty Charles is the baddest diamond dude in the world. He is the indisputable coordinator, just like Kissinger is the Jewish coordinator in America. See, when you call out the power of that, now you see why Kissinger's Secretary of State, National Security Advisor. You see all these positions that they've taken because somewhere in the world they got allies that are more powerful and got more wealth and have infiltrated and started more things than anybody else on the planet. So if there's a negative force, we clearly got our finger on the pulse of it by dealing in the subject we're dealing with here tonight. It says there are 6 rules within the diamond business which establish just how tight the diamond market is. How the cartel is protected. There are only 10 sites a year. A site is a diamond buying bazaar. Okay? There are only 10 sites a year, which means it isn't even one a month. Which means that De Beers controls the supply of diamonds, and by controlling the supply of diamonds, you control the price. Okay? Now, you control the price. You decide you ain't selling diamonds but 10 times a year, and the whole world kiss your butt. It says, 1, no one may question the authority of the diamond trading company to decide who gets which diamonds. In other words, when you get your diamonds, they come into a box. You're not allowed to open your box before you pay your money. Hear what I said? Okay, this brother is coming to get some diamonds from me. I sell him his box. He got to pay me $2 million for the box without even looking in it. And if he complains next year, if he come back to get a box, I'm going to put some worse stones in it. And see, it all works off of personal pressure. So, he decides he don't like his box. He can't give it back. And he can't sell his box. He got to polish them and put them on the market just like I told him to. 2, there should be no haggling over the price. De Beers sets all prices unilaterally, and there is no other price other than the one they tell you it costs. 3, take the entire box or none at all. 4, no client may resell the diamonds in his box if they're in their uncut form without special dispensation from Monty Charles. Israel at one time got punished by De Beers because Israel was taking the boxes and selling them at 100% profit without them even being open. So De Beers tricked them and started putting shit in their boxes. I don't mean shit, but give them the worst diamonds, and Israel buckled under. Which meant that the diamond people are more powerful than the state people, Israel. Which sounds correct since it was the diamond people that financed it and brought it on, who were living someplace other than Israel when they did it.
Right.
It's key stuff, boy, there's some key stuff here, boy.
I want to ask you a question.
Go ahead, brother. Again.
I want to ask you a question. All the diamonds, did I hear you say this, am I correct? When the diamonds leave South Africa, they don't come directly to the United States. They got to go to Israel.
They got to go to Israel, where they get cut,
Go to Israel first, and
where they
then
get cut and polished.
To all around
Then they come around the world. Correct. That's excellent. The excellent point. It used to be in the old days, before South Africa found its diamonds, that Ostwit in Belgium was where all the diamonds went. But the Jews competed with the Belgians and took it over, and then when they got the South African connection, they really took it over, because then the diamonds was coming straight from South Africa. Now the only other place where the diamonds are at is in Russia. And then we're going to talk about why Russia, too, is in the De Beers diamond market. And all that little bullshit about the ANC is communist ain't but phony, because the Russians and the South Africans all work together on the diamonds. Okay, that's key. And then you remember the Bolshevik Revolution, as I stated in the earlier tape, was primarily Jewish, which means that we got the Russians are actually the Jews, and the Jews in Russia, Israel, South Africa, the United States got a Murphy going. With British in, you got the fiplets of white supremacy, the big 5.
No sanctions on diamonds.
Hey, no sanctions. Punky Paul Simon can't bust this one up, considering that Simon is financed by Jews who are Israelis. Okay? Clients will supply De Beers with whatever information it needs to assess the diamond market. In other words, if you sell your diamonds and I ask you who you sell them to, you better tell me, as you can't come back to the table. Whatever information De Beers wants. In fact, in those early days in South Africa, De Beers and Consolidated and all those miners connection had their own police force, they had their own intelligence. They were far more stronger than the government was in knowing things. And the sixth law is diamonds must never be sold into weak hands. Understand what they're saying? We control the diamonds to the point that we don't even want no punks holding them. Don't give no diamonds to no punks. Because when we say we want to keep the diamonds off the market and the punk needs money, he got to sell, then he out. We wipe him out. We buy his stuff, we take him out. Kill him. There you go. Right. No choice but to conform to the worldwide cartel. Now, this diamond cartel was also hooked in with the Russians. In 1917, when they had the Bolshevik Revolution, the revolution needed money. So the Bolsheviks took all the king's diamonds and ran to De Beers to get cash. So the first money the Bolshevik Revolution ever had was selling the diamonds and the jewels that the Tsar of Russia had and sold them back to De Beers. In 1950, when diamonds were found plentiful in Russia, De Beers began to train the Russian geologists. So now, not only do Russia sit at the De Beers in the cartel, but when Russia found gold in 1950, that De Beers sent all of the training there to Russia so Russia could get the damn diamonds out of there. So Russia can't never say they ain't with the white South Africans. Right?
Right.
So they taught the Russians how to mine the gems. In 1963, Russia announced a boycott of South Africa. At the same time, asked Oppenheimer to keep secret that the Russians sell all of its gem diamonds directly to De Beers only. Okay? So in 63, when the world was fighting, and they were fighting in South Africa, just come through Sharpsville and stuff, okay? Biko was around, not Biko, but Mandela was around, the whole works. When this was going on, Russia was pretending to be with the ANC. Now, what happens to our people? And the ANC is being condemned because of the communist influence. Martin Luther King was condemned because of the communist influence. Both of those communists were Jewish. But they didn't wiretap Levinson, the communist, they wiretapped King. They killed King, they didn't kill Levinson. When they mess with the ANC, they won't deal with them because they say they're communists. But then it's the communists who in fact sleep with them on the diamonds and the gold to keep the price up. Which means that the relationship is phony. Don't let nobody tell you about the ANC and the communists. Yeah, they're there, but the communists sleep with the white South Africans because they white too. Period. It's a white alliance, and Russia is equally on it with the United States. And now what we're witnessing is all these countries coming together to look like now world government. Britain and Russia working it out. Israel and Russia working it out. China and Russia working it out. All these countries are now working out their problems, preparing in 1992 for the first phase of the world mergers, where Europe comes into one solid economic unit, right? 1992, which is the 500th anniversary of Columbus discovering America.
Don't forget, the United States and Russia working it out.
They're working it out. They're getting together. Russia, we going over to Russia to review their missiles, and Russia's here reviewing missiles. What kind of shit is that? You in a war, and you let somebody see your shit. That don't sound like no war. In fact, they got an early warning mechanism that lets them know anytime they're going to do anything, nuclear, anything else, they got to call them up first. Hey, Gorbachev, yeah. Hey, man, I'm going to be doing something over in the sea there. I want you not to be fucking around out there. Don't want no white boys to get hurt. In fact, when the white boys bombed Gaddafi in Libya, Schultz called the Russians 2 days before and said, back up, we're going to fuck this Gaddafi up. Right. And the Russians left all of the missiles that they controlled, the SAM ground air missiles that they ran for the Libyans, they left Libya 2 days before the bombing so that Libya couldn't defend itself. Right. What is the deal? When they asked Schultz that night of the bombing, well, why will the Russians attack us in retaliation? Said, no, No, we called our white brothers 2 days earlier. They ain't even in this. They with us.
And they're supposed to be the Army advisors and thing for Libya.
Ain't that something? It was just phony. All they
Phony,
doing,
yeah, right.
all they doing is getting information from both ears.
Right.
Right.
They run the capitalists and the communists. It's the same white
thing.
boys.
That's right.
They the same ones. They just got it just like that. And we fall for it because we don't know how to translate their relationships back to them. Don't let nobody get this tape and share it with your friends. Don't let nobody give you the bum steer. Don't let no black slip it down in front of you, because the Israeli connection tape got all them intimate relationships with Israel and South Africa go beyond them arms. You take this diamond tape and you hook that in there. Then you take the Fate of the Jews tape, which looks at the Ashkenazi Jew, who is the purest of the white Jews, who always played the chosen people thing, who disrespected the Falashas, the Yemenites, the Sephardims, and you will get all of this connection together. In fact, Bet was a Sephardic Jew. Sephardic Jew.
You also got to know that they feed the Russians with.
That's right. Every time the Russian can't eat, we send them some food. In fact, if Russia just made a big buy of corn and wheat right now,
Right.
now how the hell if we fight them, we gonna feed them?
Feed somebody.
It ain't about that. It's a white brotherhood.
That's
They just
right.
faking the people with that
Right.
shit. Interviewed by Edward J. Epstein in his book, The Rise and Fall of Diamonds, Oppenheimer revealed the secret treaty he's had with the Soviet Union since the 1964 boycott. This is a quote from Oppenheimer. We have, of course, no reason for concealing this arrangement other than the Russians preferred not to receive any public attention for obvious reasons. We paid Soviet Union more than $500 million last year. This was in 1980. This is not a sum that can be easily replaced, and I see no conceivable reason why it should want to abandon such a profitable arrangement. Russia's single largest source of currency comes from the diamond trade. Needed industrial diamonds for gems, they exchanged personnel to train Russians. In other words, the Russians needed the industrial diamonds to help dig for other diamonds. South Africa had the bort or industrial diamonds, Russia had the gem diamonds. So they traded the gems for the borts. Okay? The gems are too soft to dig. I think your radio, like your needles on record players, that's bort diamond, that type of stuff, that industrial diamond. The key point is the South African claims that black groups have communist influence, yet in reality, it knows that they too have a Soviet connection, but still play it like the ANC is communist. And that's important, that they play that out to the people. So we know that there's that heavy Jewish diamond connection. Now, the last leg of this lecture deals with the modern connection. You see, right now, the modern connection, the Anglo-American, over the years, was always considered in South Africa to be the progressives. If the Afrikaners wanted punishment, then the Anglo-American would say, well, you know, punish them, but don't hit them so hard. You know, or, yeah, we believe them Kafirs shouldn't have them, but maybe we should develop a new constitution and let the Indians vote. You know, and get the blacks some homelands, but don't do too much for them. Now, throughout the 40s and 50s, they became known as the progressives, which in fact, they were no more than white supremacists of a different flavor. The interesting thing is that in the 1980s, it was the ANC that got to meet with Anglo-American that forced both into a new situation. Anglo-American Galvin Riley, who's the present chairman, when Harry resigned, his other sons are coming up, so they got Galvin Riley as the chairman of Anglo-American. And there was a big fight between Anglo-American over how to deal with the blacks. Now, Anglo-American Corporation is the #1 single largest investor in the United States. Excuse me, #2. The #1 single largest investor is Seagram's Liquor, which are also Jews out of Canada. Okay? The Brofsteins, or the Seagrams, or well, I think it's the Brofsteins, or whatever that name, Edgar Brofstein or whatever. So they coming in out of Canada, then you got Anglo-American coming in out of South Africa. Now, Anglo-American bought a series of corporations which helped establish the finality of the empire. You got a chunk. Look at it, got him in his pocket. Long as talking to him. You got Engelhardt. Now that movie Goldfinger, in fact, the guy that played Goldfinger just died a couple of days ago or yesterday because he's in all the obituaries today. But Goldfinger was patterned after Charles Engelhardt, who was friends to Kennedy and Johnson. Engelhardt is the one who is the prototype for Goldfinger when Ian Fleming wrote the book. Now think about that. Ian Fleming is a writer. He writes all these James Bond books, right?
Yes, sir.
What's the James Bond book? Diamonds are forever, forever, forever. Goldfinger. He loves only gold. Da, da. Think about it. Those songs were bestsellers. Goldfinger. Diamonds are forever. Those movies are about them. The guy who wanted so much gold he was going to move in on Fort Knox. Remember Odd Job?
Yeah, with that hat.
I should have shot it at the camera. Well, that was Charles Engelhardt who they pet. But Ian Fleming and 007 and the British Secret Service guy was all hooked into knowing how to propagate using your media. See, those movies are part of that association of helpers. Remember the secret society? A circle within a circle. These are the individuals and those are the institutions. You hide the individuals through the institutions. And then you radiate all throughout the world. Come up with 007 and all of that. Go back. What that diamonds are forever? Diamonds are not forever. But to keep feeding you that illusion in the movie is important. Well, Charles Engelhardt came up with Engelhardt Minerals and Chemicals Corporation. And it was Andre Meyer, who from the Lazar Perez, who helped merge it in with Anglo-American. Okay? And then Anglo-American recently did two things. You had a company called Phillips Brothers. Phillips Brothers, P-H-I-L-L-I-P, Phillips Brothers. How Phillips is spelled. Phillips Brothers were the #1 buyer and seller in the world. Now, in the Bible it tells you to look out for somebody, P-H-I-L-L-I-P, Phillips. How you spell Phillips?
That's right, Phillips.
Phillips Brothers. Okay, Phillips Brothers was the largest commodities trader in the world. I mean, they had information on everybody who needed anything. Their intelligence system was greater than any CIA's, FBI's, anybody. They knew all the buyers and sellers in the world, and they dealt in the spot market. If this guy needed oil, they knew where to get it and where to send it. If somebody else needed handkerchiefs, they knew how to get it and send it. I don't mean 10, I mean millions. So they got bought up like Engelhardt, Phillips Brothers got bought up with another company called Solomon Brothers. Solomon Brothers was Jewish too, as was Phillips Brothers, who was one of the early miners in South Africa, as well as Engelhardt, who was hooked in with South Africa. Solomon Brothers is an investment banking company. Solomon Brothers is the largest holder of municipal bond notes in America, still today. Solomon Brothers, if you remember when I talked about the Rothschilds, the Solomon Brothers is a part of that acquirer of government debt. That debt, that's important in controlling the country, is the debt. So Anglo-American is getting bigger about this one. It merged these two into something called Philbro, which was the gold and was the Solomon hooking in with Phillips Brothers. That became Philbro, and eventually they changed the name back to Solomon Incorporated. And I have a tombstone here where it says that Philbro Solomon Incorporated has changed its name effective May 7, 1988 to Solomon Incorporated. Solomon Brothers, Philbro Energy, and Phillips Brothers Incorporated are the operating units, and they will work. It's New York Times, May 6, 1986, announcing that it's now called Solomon Incorporated. Okay? Now, interesting enough, when the pressure of South Africa came, here's an article, Philbro to pull out of South Africa. Philbro Solomon, the financial conglomerate that trades everything from bonds to gold, said yesterday it would end its operations in South Africa and close its Johannesburg office. Philbro is the biggest American company so far to announce it would pull out of South Africa. Now, let me ask you this. If Philbro is owned by Anglo-American, how can they pull out of South Africa when they owned by South Africa's largest corporation? Anglo-American Corporation controls 54% of the Johannesburg stock market. That makes sense?
So how can it pull out of itself, in other words?
How can it pull out of itself? Well, see, it was just a gimmick. Now, wait till I show you all the nigger mayors, like Mayor Marion Barry and others, who fell for that bullshit.
Because they don't know anything
Well, they do know. They punk operatives. If you want B to B for
I don't
something,
think
you
they know.
talk that bullshit.
I don't believe them.
Oh, they know. They ain't, listen, ain't nobody up here sucking butt in front of all the world with all this evidence, and they got a whole city. You know a mayor can sit up and order 100 people to go research the question. They don't lack. I've been up in there. They don't lack for information. They got 42,000 people at their fingertip to go get the damn information when they want it.
They don't have
What were you gonna say,
nothing
sister?
to know.
A lot of them don't.
Huh?
A lot of them don't take that information.
Oh, I tell you they do. I've been up there. I remember when I brought the challenge to Harold Washington about sleeping with these people. Harold Washington knew him, but he didn't want to. He wanted to own up to it. Here's the story in the Defender. I brought it right to him. This is from September 13th, 1983, and I don't have the front page. There's my name. The whole article was Coakley accused this Washington administration for sleeping with South African companies. And it says, in May 82, Solomon Brothers was acquired by Philbro, the world's largest trader of commodities. Now, since they didn't know, we put it in the paper for them. We challenged them about it, but they still there. They still took money from them.
Steve, what I'm saying, they submerged that in their mind. You know what I
No.
mean?
That's bullshit. That's bullshit.
No, they don't want to know.
Listen,
They don't
don't
want to
no
know.
nigga run no city unless he know who not to fuck with.
But I mean, they know that. Right, that's what I'm saying. They know that. They don't want to know nothing else.
Else, or they bust them for this,
Right.
or they bust them for that,
Right.
or they just fall over with a heart attack.
Right.
Right, that's what I'm saying. They don't want to know nothing.
Right. No, Steve, you know what it is? The reason why they won't stand up is because there aren't enough smart blacks that'll stand with them. That's really the reason. They'll leave them right out there by themselves and let them get shot down.
That's interesting because I got a piece where Harold Washington talks about them saying how they are a tough nut to crack. So we know what kind of nut they are. Anyway, it says here that that Philbro's world's largest trading commodities and a new firm, Philbro Solomon, created. Anglo-American owns 30% of Philbro Solomon stock. Two Philbro Solomon directors, Milton Rosenthal, president of Engelhard Minerals, and H. Ronald Frazier, have direct ties to Anglo. See, the head of Engelhard is on the board of Philbro Solomon because they interlocking relationships. One day I went to the library, and this is my sheet where I took Minerals and Resources Corporation, Solomon Incorporated, Anglo-American, Consolidated Goldfields, Engelhard Corporation, and De Beers, and did an interlocking directorship thing. Now, if I was to put this, you can see the lines going all over. They're all got 6 or 7 interlocking directors. And I'll pass this around. You look at the names carefully. You'll see how it interlocks. The important thing is, how can I go to the damn library in a half an hour and get this, and they sitting up running the city and don't know it? Yeah, they know it. They lucky. I'm telling you all, the conspiracy for world control ain't no damn sneak attack. It's based upon overt fear. You will be scared to bring it up. That's why they so mad at me. Because I ain't learned to shut up, because I ain't updating.
They don't want to know that.
It's off limits, right?
Right.
None dare call it conspiracy. Right.
Right. They can't talk about that
And
whether
don't
they know it or
forget,
not.
Steve,
But they scared. Now look at this. Now I said here in the article, where that article go? Here, let's check this out. This only indicates, said researcher Steve Coakley, in fact, that Philbro Solomon and Engelhard Minerals and Chemicals are owned by the same people. Right now, trains go right through the black community with Engelhard Minerals on it and with Anglo-American right on it, go right through. I seen them come down 87th Street. I seen them go across that one going alley from Stony all the way across. South, all over our community, they trains that's run around, just like South Africa trains.
Yeah.
Just they built the railroad there. It says if Washington was going to stop Continental and First National from selling the Krugerrand, surely we do not want to give the city's money to a financial firm that is interlocked on the owning and selling of the Krugerrand. See, this was at a time when I was busting up this little joke they had going where they say, well, we're going to stop them from selling the Krugerrand. Who give a fuck about the Krugerrand? You just take the damn gold coin and don't melt it down. You just keep it in the gold bar. They ain't stopping gold bars. They stopping a funky little coin. They didn't like Kruger no way. Remember?
Right.
So what do they care about wiping him out? He ain't nothing. And it's a fraud to promote the fact. Because now the Krugerrand is gone. They just stopped gold. You don't hear them talking about Krugerrands no more. Well, what do they got a new coin out. And y'all, who know the name of the new coin? No, that ain't it. Who know the name of the new coin? Well, ain't that a goddamn shame? They come up with a new coin to replace the one they banned, and don't none of y'all know what the name of it is. Ain't that some good shit? Now, which one of your leaders told that to you? Says, on the front of this sheet, Grayson Mitchell, who was press secretary then, said, we don't have anything to do with them in South Africa. What would we care? We just mind our own business here in Chicago. It says on 3 separate occasions between April 2nd and June 20th, Washington campaign received donations totaling $7,500 from Solomon Brothers when the brother had a rule said he wouldn't take but $1,500 from one person. How he take $7,500 from Solomon?
From anybody who got a contract with the city.
Well, goddamn, all the bonds are bought by Solomon Brothers. They the largest investor in municipal bonds. They got all our bonds.
They're not doing work for the city.
Oh, brother, they are doing work for the city. They are the city. They the ones running the bonds.
They own the city.
I wish I had, evidently. Oh, here it is right here. Look at this. Oh, stop. Here's a speech. I just want to show him something. Here's a speech of Harold Washington. Affirmative action, or a hole in the head. Statement by Harold Washington to the Target Assessment Project, May 29, 1987. And we have innovated the idea of co-seniors. Instead of one senior, we had two. For example, Solomon Brothers in a joint venture with W.R. Lazard and Company, which is Lazard Perez, which is the other goddamn investment company owned by Anglo-American. Lazard Perez. Now, if Harold Washington don't know who they are, he's taking their money and they getting our money. He's talking about that there, look at this. The public finance industry is one of the last bastions of the old boy network. The old boy network is about pure white supremacy. So he knew enough about that. Then he said that locked out women, minorities, and anyone not in the club. He knew that. Then he said, as many of you know, it's a tough nut to crack. Well, goddamn, then if it's that tough, why are you bowing down to him? So then he says that Solomon should be honored because they now added some Negroes on the bond thing. See, they come up, when they sell a bond, they come up with a tombstone, look like this. It's called a financial tombstone. You'll see it in the papers. IBM is floating a $250 million note, and these are the investment companies, where the lead company is always at the top. They're Solomon Brothers, for example, okay? IBM is big in South Africa, Big Blue, all that hooks. That's why they would help IBM and on and on. But the main thing is that when these tombstone stones come out of the city, and usually the lectures, I bring them so I can show the people how heavy they in. They in everybody's stuff. They the #1 municipal investor in government bonds. Why? Because the Rothschild strategy always was to get control of government bonds, because when you control the bonds, you control the city. By controlling the bonds, look how the school system got turned over in 79 when we got the School Finance Authority. That was about the bonds being rejected by first Chicago and Solomon and them, and Solomon Brothers and Lazard Perez went to Springfield and set up the School Finance Authority and called it the New York solution, because Lazard Perez, headed by Felix Rohatyn, had just taken over New York in 1975 when they refused to roll over the bonds, and that's how they started getting control of every city in America. Started New York in 75, Cleveland in 77, Chicago in 79. On the West Coast, they used Proposition 13 to take the slack out the budgets because they had surpluses. They took the slack out, reduced them down, and they got those cities as well. They made cities impotent. By making them impotent, you made them have to rely on stuff like this. Then, this is Harold Washington's campaign donation fund. This is, Solomon Brothers. You can go to State of Illinois building and look up Solomon Brothers and find out who they give money to. They give it to Hardigan. They give it to Thompson. They give it to Washington. They gave it to Edgar. They gave it to the Cook County Democratic Party. They gave it to Ed Burke. They gave it to Harold Washington again. They gave it to Ed Burke again. They gave it to Donenwald. They gave it to the Democrats again. They gave it to Jane Byrne. They gave it to Daly. They gave it to Daly. They gave it to Daly. They gave it to Partee. They gave it to Harold Washington again. They gave it to Harold Washington again and again.
City bond. Is this still muni bond?
No, this is the money they've donated to the campaigns. This is their campaign disclosure form.
83 in there?
Huh?
Was 83 in there?
Yeah, this is the ones from the ones that I caught that I put in the article. Because when they challenged it, I went and pulled the stuff out. I said,
Did they donate to Harold Washington in 83?
Yeah.
He wouldn't have got in if they hadn't done that.
Yeah, because see, those Jews that make those companies up liked Brother Harold. And Brother Harold did them well. And Brother Harold would never cross them. He'd cross you first. And I was never one to bite my lip to tell the brother, I know who you're sleeping with. That's why they go to take, Coakley made a mockery of Jackson and Washington. Because I know that they balls don't belong to them. They never did. They was good with us, but they would never overthrow the ones who run in the world. Why? Because they felt that they couldn't run the world. They wasn't powerful enough, so they didn't mind being the top or the slave. Which would you rather be, the king in a small pond or a wimp in a big pond? They chose to be the king in a small pond. You was the pond and they was the smallie. And they worked it that way. And I'm sorry to say, I challenge anybody today, yesterday, they sleeping with this stuff and it ain't no good because all of it represents the white supremacy, Jewish connection from South Africa. And I dare anybody to stand up and refute it. They just ain't got no information to stand on. Here's Marion Barry writing a letter to the mayors talking about how good Solomon Brothers was for pulling out of South Africa. Now, how can they pull out? How can Solomon Brothers pull out when they're owned by Anglo-America? You can't do it. You can't do it. Is it still on, brother? We off? You want me to stop? Still on? Okay. It says, this is Ron Picor. He took this letter in 87. They still using this garbage. I raised the stink through Marlene Carter to stop, because we put in the South African sanctions bill, which was a phony. So then I got behind Marlene Carter, even though I was working for another alderman who didn't understand it. It was Gene Sawyer. So I moved over to Marlene, because I used all the aldermen to move my program. I moved over to Marlene, and she challenged them on it, and Picor came back with this letter to say Solomon Brothers was okay. Picor is just getting this letter from the managing director, Horowitz, from Solomon Brothers out of New York. As the enclosed letter indicates, it is well acknowledged that Solomon Brothers has taken the leadership position on Wall Street in ceasing to do business in South Africa. Ceasing to do business in South Africa when you're owned by South Africa? That don't make no sense to me. How you going to not do business for your family when you still a son of your mother and father? I mean, you just can't never change that. And it says, as indicated, Solomon Brothers has stated our policy under the firm does no business in South Africa or with South African customers and will refrain from doing so as long as the current system of apartheid, one which we find abhorrent and intolerable, continues. And then you got Marion Barry writing a letter to the head of Solomon Brothers, signed Marion Barry, President, and I let you have one of these just so you can have one for yourself.
I get those financial statements.
Huh?
How can I get one of those financial?
Just go down to the State of Illinois building where they hold the financial statements. In fact, if I had time, I would have went down there before tonight to see who they gave money to recently. Because I think we'd all be intrigued to see where Solomon Brothers is giving the money. I forget which floor. You just ask for the floor for the financial disclosures. You look in the book and pick which ones you want to look at. They got all the packs in there. They have to register there so you can find out where they're giving the money. Open it up and see which one of your leaders ain't acting right. Look at the Jackson campaign and see how much they gave him. It says the mayors have gone on record on numerous occasions of denouncing racist policies in South Africa. I recently received your letter highlighting Philbro Solomon Brothers Incorporated rationale for ceasing business in South Africa. It says Solomon Brothers over the past 10 years through your firm support of our annual convention. That's the mayor's convention, which was in Chicago last year. Harold Washington presided over it. It says, with Solomon Brothers Incorporated over the past 10 years through your firm's support of our annual conventions and committedly our support of bond projects in member cities. I mean, they traded off some little trinkets for a conference to do business in your cities. He got it right in his own letter. The National Conference of Black Mayors. And they used this to Marlene Carter to justify that Solomon was okay when they didn't have none of this. I mean, this you couldn't even get past none of this. This is sick. You couldn't get past this. And I just pass that around. It's a little tacky. I'll pass this letter around so folks can get a look at it. Oh, I see ain't nobody passing. I should have sent it the other way. I'll send this one that way. Pass it around so people can look at it, just so they can get an idea. But the main thing was to bring up the fact that connection was there, and that connection has not been responded to by our community because they lack the knowledge and the fortitude to speak out. Also, the fact that many of our notes are done by Solomon Brothers. January 1st to March 31st, our 1985 investments, the 102 Daily Tender Notes, Solomon Brothers was floating them. The 44 account laborers pension fund. Say, I'm ready for all the questions. The laborers pensions fund, Solomon Brothers, floated $20 million note. The O'Hare revenue bond, 741, floated by Solomon Brothers. The debt revenue service, the $18 million was invested. It matured on May 16, 1988. Solomon Brothers. And it just goes on and on and on. Solomon Brothers, Lazar Perez. Now remember, Lazar Perez is the sister group to Solomon. Lazar Perez, where Solomon underwrites the bonds, Lazar Perez is the municipal advisor to all the cities. See Rohatton in New York? Then you got this guy, see this article in the Tribune, where Washington, on his first day in office, gave Lazar Perez $1 million contract to be the chief financial advisors for the city of Chicago. And there's Franklin Raines, who was assigned from Rohatton, who's on the Trilateral Commission, who's an Austrian Jew, who in Ralph Nader's book, Big Boy, said, amazingly, why does Rohatton have such a good relationship in all the American cities when he's such a known white supremacist hanging out with South African Oppenheimer? Hold on. And the reason, is this almost the end of that tape again? And the reason I thought it was strange was that it says that Lazar Perez gives financial advice to more than 24 cities by financial advice from Lazar Perez, whose blue chip name is Felix Rohatton, who is the senior, Raines looks every bit of the part. He's the senior vice president for municipal finance at the prestigious investment banking firm of Lazar Perez. Is that going to the end? Yeah. Okay. Raines, is strange, is in charge of the cities of Washington, D.C. What's it say? Raines is in charge of Washington, D.C., Cleveland, and Chicago. And he's part of a 4-person rescue squad that controls 24 cities. And does it seem strange that this guy just happened to be a Rhodes scholar? A black Rhodes scholar? Who comes right out, and he's with the Rhodes scholar firm, Lazar Perez, which is all part of Angelo and Rhodes' stuff, who left it as part of the Rhodes Trust. Which means it all comes full circle. They call him a fiscal firefighter. It says he tells cities that they must cut spending to win the confidence of Wall Street investors. Just let me finish this before I finish this, for the 3 hours is almost up. I just want to say, for the end of the tape, that it's Lazar Perez and Solomon Brothers through Felix Rohatton, Michael David Veal, the Henry Kaufman, who's the chief economist, David Stockman, who now works there, J. Ira Harris, who's big in Chicago on the Community Trust, was Harold Washington's guy. He's there from Solomon Brothers in Chicago. He got $13 million just for being bought out by Angelo. So the main thing is that these connections exist. They're not exposed by our community. The Jews are interrelated in the Diamond Connection, and they all sleep together in the bed of white supremacy, and we must overthrow white supremacy. And I just want to thank you all for coming out. I'm going to add a few things to this right after this, just for the sake of letting those know that are here. But for the sake of that tape, I had to close it out, because surprisingly, we've been here 3 hours already. And I know you all have done great to have sat through all of this. But the main thing is to remember that there's a tight web of white supremacy, and we must fight and overthrow it. And that is our only show cause. Brother Gant, I got to say for the tape, in ending that when the world was young, it says in the Rand book, it was a dry surface. It was one of the great landmass surrounded by a sea, and at the center of it was Africa. Africa is the father of all other continents. All are derived from it. Then there must have been directly connected to the God force versus the forces of no reason. If the key Jews and Rhodes sought to retard Africa, which is the origin of life, by developing a counterforce and plan, then they are the gatekeepers of hell. They are the bearers of the white Jesus, the reconstructed Bible, those who kill Jesus, and those who perpetrate racism only on the visual identification of the color.